criminal investigation into allegations Peter Mandelson was passing sensitive information to the convicted sex offender. Sir Keir Starmer says the former US ambassador betrayed our country and he regrets appointing him. Former Business Secretary Lord John Hutton has told Tonight with Andrew Marr this could be the end for the Prime Minister.
I'm afraid enough is enough. I think does make it extremely difficult for the Prime Minister. And I say that with a huge amount of regret, but I think this is a very serious moment for him. And I think he needs to reflect very carefully on everything to do with the appointment of Peter Mandelson to this particular role. It could well mark the end of the Prime Minister's time in office. Yes, I think so.
Peter Mandelson has previously denied any wrongdoing but will be stripped of his peerage and removed from the Privy Council. Baroness Kennedy is a Labour member of the House of Lords and has told Andrew Marr the Prime Minister has a right to feel let down.
It's a betrayal of the Prime Minister who appointed him to be in that cabinet and to be more or less his deputy. It's a betrayal of the Labour Party, of which he was supposed to be a prime member and leader. But much, to my mind, more important than anything, a betrayal of the national interests and of the people of this country.
Yes, absolutely.
Who are suffering the consequences of a global crisis.
Meanwhile, the Health Secretary has told LBC claims Epstein had ties to Russian authorities must be properly investigated. An email seemingly sent by Ghislaine Maxwell appears to confirm the infamous photo of Andrew Mountbatten Windsor and Virginia Giuffre is real. It appears to contradict Andrew's claim that he never met Giuffre and that the image may have been doctored. He denies wrongdoing. Gloria Allred, an attorney who has represented nearly 30 of Jeffrey Epstein's victims, has told Andrew those who had a relationship with him should cooperate with a US inquiry that has already summoned Bill and Hillary Clinton.
Andrew, formerly known as Prince, and Peter Mandelson, former UK ambassador to the US, should volunteer, even if they're not invited, to testify before Congress. And I think that, by the way, that, Congress, since they're subpoenaing a former president, might want to invite the current president.
Also this evening, a man who sexually assaulted 2 boys at a summer camp has admitted drugging his wife so she would not wake up. 76-year-old John Reuben admitted giving Susan Reuben to Mazepam in Leicestershire in July last year. He'll be sentenced on Friday after he also pleaded guilty to child cruelty towards 6 other victims who had also been drugged. 6 people have been cleared of aggravated burglary after an alleged break-in at an Israeli defence firm's UK site. A jury at Woolwich Crown Court failed to reach a verdict on charges of criminal damage and only returned partial verdicts for violent disorder. LBC's Thea Rickard reports.
The Palestine Action activists were accused of breaking into Elbit Systems in Filton in August 2024 using a prison van. During a trial at Woolwich Crown Court, the jury were told the defendants smashed up equipment like drones and wielded sledgehammers.
If you swing that once more at me, it's going to get really serious.
Before the jury left the court to deliberate on 19 verdicts, they were told not to let their views on the conflict in the Middle East influence them.
And returning to our top story for a moment, MPs have approved the release of documents relating to Lord Peter Mandelson's appointment as British ambassador to the United States. We'll bring you more as we get it. And the Princess of Wales has released a message of solidarity to cancer patients on World Cancer Day. Kate describes how her own journey has moments of fear and exhaustion, but also ones of strength and kindness. In the city, the FTSE 100 has closed up 87 points at 10,402. The pound buys $1.36 and €1.15. LBC weather, spells of rain lingering in the north tonight. These will also move into southern areas, a low of freezing. Rain pushing northwards across the UK tomorrow, falling heavy at times. Drier for far western Scotland, highs of 10 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Amelia Cox.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Iain Dale.
Hello, a very good evening. It's 5 minutes past 7 on LBC. Welcome to the programme. It's Iain Dale with you until 10. I didn't think when we finished the programme last night that I would be saying this sentence to you at the beginning of the programme today. I now think Keir Starmer's position as Prime Minister is under threat in a way that it wasn't 24 hours ago, in a way that it wasn't a week ago. We know that he's beleaguered. We know that a lot of Labour MPs think he's not the man to lead them into the next election. But the events of today, in several different ways, have illustrated that the mood in the Parliamentary Labour Party is now such that they may seek to topple their own Prime Minister. Now, that is quite a big thing to say. Now, the day started, well, it didn't start, it was at midday with Prime Minister's questions, where Kemi Badenoch squared up against Keir Starmer, and she didn't go in all guns blazing. There were no histrionics, there were no sort of antics. She forensically asked Keir Starmer various questions, and this is where he made a big mistake.
Can the Prime Minister tell us, did the official security vetting he received mention Mandelson's ongoing relationship with the paedophile Jeffrey Epstein?
So clear. Prime Minister?
Yes, it did. As a result, various questions were put to him. I intend to disclose to this House all of the national security, prejudice to international relations on one side. I want to make sure this House sees the full documentation, so it will see for itself the extent to which time and time again Mandelson completely misrepresented the extent of his relationship with Epstein and lied throughout the process, including in response to the due diligence.
That one word, ongoing. Did the Prime Minister have did Peter Mandelson have an ongoing relationship with Jeffrey Epstein? Did the Prime Minister know that? And that is at the core of this. And you could almost see the shock on Labour MPs' faces when he admitted that. Now, later, they made a concession to the Conservatives because the Conservatives had launched this Opposition Day debate, and they made a concession to the Conservatives saying, well, all of the documentation will be released through the Intelligence and Security Committee. They would decide what they shouldn't release because of national security. But in the last hour, the Metropolitan Police have scuppered that. They have said that none of this information should be released because it should prejudice their inquiries. Well, Aggie Chambray, our Deputy Political Editor, is with us. She's going to be with me throughout the programme because I want to encourage you in this hour. Yes, give your reaction to the position that the Prime Minister is in now. But also, I think a lot of people have got a lot of queries about where this scandal actually is and what is it all about. And Aggie is here to answer as many questions as possible. Take us through the day.
What an extraordinary day, Ian. I'm just going to tell you what happened at the very, very start of the day. And I got a message from a very senior Labour MP who said there was less than 1% chance that Sir Keir Starmer's premiership, his government would collapse today. A few hours later, that had been revised to 8%. Yes, still very
8%,
low.
8%, that's very precise.
8%, very precise, still very low. But I think that shows some of the chaos of the day. So last night, we knew that the Conservatives had put forward this Opposition Day debate, a humble address, as it's called. And basically that means that they could force this binding vote on whether or not documents to do with the vetting would be released. And obviously it was clear to the government that they didn't want this to happen, so they put down their own amendment. And the amendment basically said, yes, we'll release these documents except papers prejudicial to UK national security or international relations. So that amendment was put down last night. Whether or not last night they thought that they would get that past their own MPs, I don't know. MPs are really confused about this, but it was clear today that that was absolutely not going to pass. So today, after there was a rattle from Labour's Paula Barker, she's the vice chair on the two parliamentary committees on standards and on privileges. She set out this afternoon just how annoyed she'd been of the government's handling of this.
Leadership is about integrity, principle and vision. These are the values of my Labour Party, and we must embody them now more than ever. And I'm really sad to say that I am ashamed of the amendment that was laid today. And I think that we have to do much, much better, Madam Deputy Speaker. So I implore my government to withdraw their amendment and let the ICS deal with the issues. because that is the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Therefore, Madam Deputy Speaker, if it is not withdrawn, it is with a heavy heart that I must vote against my government amendment today.
Now, Paula Barker is not one of the usual suspects. She's not a rebellious MP, I don't think. And for a newly elected MP to stand up in the chamber and say that about her own party and her own government, that's quite something, isn't it?
And that has been, I've seen that all day, Iain. People who are the most loyal of MPs. Someone who said to me, I would just never, ever vote against the government, saying to me, I just didn't know whether I could vote with the government today. And whispering to me as well, I'm sure we'll come on to this, but whispering to me, they thought that the Chief of Staff, Morgan McSweeney, must go. That is not the kind of thing that you normally hear from those very, very, very loyal Labour MPs. But prior to Paula Barker making that intervention in the Commons, ministers were given some advice, we'll call it advice, on how to go about releasing these files on Mandelson's appointment as ambassador from none other than the former Deputy Prime Minister, Angela Rayner.
Given the public disgust and the sickening behaviour of Peter Mandelson and the importance of transparency, in 2022 I proposed a humble address seeking information about PPE, which the party opposite resisted, and my honourable friend, the member for Hackney South, mentioned just before. Should we not have the ISC not have the same role now in keeping public confidence in the process?
So soon after this came the amendment to the amendment. That basically meant that the government realised that they were not going to get their amendment through. They were going to lose this absolutely crucial vote. So they amended their amendment. It's called a manuscript amendment. And this meant that it would read, except papers prejudicial to UK national security or international relations, which shall instead be referred to the Intelligence and Security Committee. You actually heard Paula Barker referring to, she called it the ISC. So effectively that meant that the ISC, this MP committee, would then decide which of these documents that related to national security or international relations could then be released. The Tories then backed that, and that, well, in the last few minutes actually has been nodded through. That means there wasn't a vote over it because there was no longer any jeopardy. So the jeopardy over that specific vote is gone, but the damage very much done. And on the issue of anger towards the Prime Minister among Labour MPs, their mood was summed up by the Corbyn-era Shadow Chancellor, John McDonnell.
There are questions now as a result of that about, is he going to take some direct action with regard to his own administration? Are there going to be some reforms? Are there going to be changes in personnel? Because if that doesn't take place, I think people will start losing confidence in him, definitely. I've never called for him to go, but I have lost confidence in him. Yes, I certainly have. And I think the decisions around Mandelson certainly pushed me over the edge because I thought this was just such a poor decision.
So John McDonnell there. I mean, look, let's be honest. John McDonnell is someone who's seen as being on the left of the Labour Party. He's not kind of Keir Starmer's natural bedfellow, but there's still really strong language from him. And I think that point about personnel is interesting because Morgan McSweeney's name has come up again and again and again for me today. And one minister telling me that that minister and other ministers have told Number 10 that he needs to go. I think it is worth...
And just on that, it's clear that he was the one behind the Mandelson appointment as ambassador, isn't it? Alva Reyes, the political editor of the New Statesman, has written a brilliant long-read piece today, and she demonstrates that there were 6 candidates for that job. Sue Gray, when she was in Morgan McSweeney's position, she narrowed it down to either Karen Pierce staying on or David Miliband. When Morgan McSweeney took over the job, there were 4 diplomatic candidates, plus George Osborne and Peter Mandelson. And Keir Starmer apparently was in favour of George Osborne. Imagine if that...
Which is extraordinary in itself,
totally extraordinary, because according to Alva Ray, he's never liked Peter Mandelson. So the only way that Peter Mandelson got that appointment is because Morgan McSweeney persuaded the Prime Minister to do it. Now, in the end, the buck stops with the Prime Minister, but this will be further ammunition to those Labour MPs who want to see the back of Mr McSweeney.
Yes, exactly that. But I think it is worth making the point that actually, as a government source made to me today, how much cover does getting rid of Morgan McSweeney actually give the Prime Minister? Because yes, Morgan McSweeney may have encouraged him, may have convinced him, but fundamentally, as you say, Sir Keir Starmer made the final decision, yes, based on Morgan's advice, but they just were saying to me they were not sure how much this would actually protect the PM. I did actually put that to another Labour MP who I spoke to afterwards, and they said, well, the justification for getting rid of Morgan McSweeney was that a lot of people really, really don't like him. But I think that is very much part of the story tonight. And I think another part of the story tonight is that point of how much cover does it give the PM, if indeed he does get rid of them, of him, and how long would that protect him for? Because in the last hour too, Iain, our colleague Andrew Marr spoke with the former Blair and Brown era Labour Cabinet Minister John Hutton about whether Keir Starmer's future in Downing Street is indeed in peril.
I think there have been so many serious lapses of personal judgment, particularly by Peter. It is the end, clearly, of his career, but it could well mark the end of the Prime Minister's time in office. Yes, I think so.
So you think this could actually be the as it were, the final days, not the final days, but the final weeks of the Starmer premiership?
Well, I don't know for sure. I think there's a moment now where I'm sure the parliamentary party will be having some very serious reflections on the direction of the government. And I think the sense of the lack of purpose of the government, the lack of direction, the mistakes of judgment.
Aggie, more from you in a moment. But let's talk to Neil Lawson, who's been around Labour politics really since the beginning of the Blair years. He's director of the campaign group Compass, member of the interim council of the new mainstream group of Labour figures, and former advisor to both Peter Mandelson and Gordon Brown. Neil, apologies for keeping you waiting, but I just wanted to put all of today's events in context with Aggie first. Where do you think things are now for Keir Starmer?
Well, I think they've always been serious. I never thought he was very stable. I never thought he was going to be a very good Prime Minister. And in a sense, the uproar around the Mandelson scandal, is taken root so firmly because of the sense of failure, the sense of drift, the U-turns, the lack of popularity, the bad judgment. So this isn't happening in isolation. It's happening about the backdrop of a failing political project. And if you put those two things together, then clearly it's a moment of huge peril for the Prime Minister. But if this just becomes, Iain, a thing about scapegoats, about a few bad apples, about replacing one advisor or even one Prime Minister with another, then I don't think we're going to get to the root of what this Mandelson scandal tells us about our political structures, our political culture, and what's been happening in our country and our political system for a long time.
You've worked with Peter Mandelson. Tell us where you think he is tonight, because my suspicion is that his instincts will want him to fight back, but other people will be saying to him, no, just zip your mouth for a change.
I have no idea. I worked briefly for Peter Mandelson during the 1997 election. And in doing that, you could see, the talent as a campaigner, as a communicator, but also as a manager of an election team, a very successful election team. And you can see why leaders like having people like Peter Mandelson around them. But clearly, and this isn't just, Morgan McSweeney or Keir Starmer's lack of judgment. Why was he ever brought back in, given, what a risk that he was? And I guess there's a thing about, the dark arts, and if you live by the sword, you die by the sword. And, Peter was a briefer and a whisperer, and a gossiper. That's what he was great at, but then, he would be doing that to all people in all sides. And I think there's a lack of judgment. But why do we want those kind of puppet masters around? Why are they so important? Why isn't having vision, personality, plans, policy, programs, etc. enough? Yes, a bit of communications, but whether it's Mandelson or whether it's Morgan McSweeney or whether it was Dominic Cummings, these people now unelected people play such a prominent role in deciding the democratic or actually the non-democratic fate of our country. And I think it's all of these questions now need to be asked, not just about personal behaviour of this individual or that individual.
Now, 3 months tomorrow, we have all of these elections all across the country. Now, timing is everything in politics. Could the timing of those elections actually save Keir Starmer now? Because, say, for example, the Labour Party MPs decided, well, we want rid of him now. I mean, it would be almost impossible to get a new leader in place for that election campaign unless there was a coronation. And I don't see any prospect of a coronation.
No, and there definitely shouldn't be a coronation, because what the Labour Party and the government need is a conversation about what's gone wrong since 2024, and not just replace the person at the top of the pile and think that everything's going to be all right. Even if that's a better communicator, it's someone with the country voted for a big change in 2024. They haven't had it. At some stage, there has to be a reset to allow the kind of cost of living, issues in particular that the country kind of wanted help with to begin to happen. And Labour, if it is going to change leader, now or after May, they need to have a conversation about what's gone wrong and what kind of programme, not just individual or good communicator, is going to get the party and the government out of this mess. So it's the change of direction that really matters, not just the change of leader.
You talk about a good communicator. Your group, Mainstream, I say your group, you're part of it. That's seen as a bit of a front organisation for Andy Burnham. Has the current Labour Party leadership engaged with Mainstream much?
Not a great deal, I would say. I mean, I think one of the things that this whole scandal highlights is the kind of hypocrisy of the way in which people like Andy Burnham was treated. A very successful mayor delivering very successful growth in Manchester, got really strong ideas about new politics, new democracy, new economy, got something real to offer the country, and he's blocked by some bureaucrats on the NEC, and people like me were, threatened with being thrown out of the party, and tens of thousands of others have, for liking a tweet from someone from another party or whatever kind of small, misdemeanor. And then you've got someone like Peter Mandelson, who's done everything he's done, and then isn't thrown out of the party. He resigned. He jumped. He was never pushed. And I think people see this kind of hypocrisy and the kind of hyper-factionalism. And this goes back, again, the roots of the problem, which we need to explore. Otherwise, we'll repeat it again. That when you just have a tiny slither of people with control over everything, control over the cabinet, over the NEC, over the Parliamentary Labour Party, when they're trying to get people to leave the party and throw them out in record numbers, then you've got a very brittle, narrow political project, which is bound to come a cropper. And I think the eruptions of this week are a symptom of much deeper causes about the party's lack of vision, lack of preparedness for government and programme to make the difference that the country wanted.
Just one final question, briefly, if you can. We've got the Gorton and Denton by-election coming up. If Labour loses that by-election, do you think that will be the crucial moment for Keir Starmer?
Well, I think we now all know, Ian, that politics is unpredictable. It changes by the minute and the hour, and they had a candidate in Andy Burnham who probably, I wouldn't say easily, but could much more comfortably have contested that by-election, hugely popular, not just in Manchester and in that seat, but across the country. And they turned their back on that person. Keir Starmer led the charge, at the NEC meeting that blocked Andy Burnham. And I think if Labour does lose that by-election, and now they're very much on the back foot, then he is going to be, the one held to blame for that.
Neil, thank you very much indeed. That's Neil Lawson, director of the campaign group Compass and involved heavily in Mainstream. Right, we're going to be talking to Conservative MP Alicia Cairns. She was in the Commons this afternoon. She's been pushing the government to tell us whether Peter Mandelson is still being paid by the Foreign Office, something I was questioning the other day as well. So she'll be here in a moment. Aggie Chambray will be here for the rest of the hour too. 23 minutes past 7.
This is LBC. Dale. Text 84850. This is LBC.
25 minutes past 7 on LBC. Elisha Cairns joins us, current Conservative National Security and Safeguarding Minister and MP for Rutland and Stamford. Welcome. You were, shall we say, involved in the unravelling of the Boris Johnson government. I mean, do you think there's any analogies to be drawn with what's happening here and what happened there?
I think there's something that's very difficult when you're first elected. It's very difficult to feel the jungle drums, and particularly when you've got a big cohort of new MPs, which is what we had in 2019, and of course they have now, to understand whether it's the precipice. Is this the end? And I think with Boris, many people thought at multiple points, this is the end, this has to be it. And it wasn't. And I think it does feel different. And I think from Angela Rayner today, you saw a real change in dynamic. She was flanked by her Praetorian Guard, when every time she was sat in the chamber, there was always two people sat either side of her, making sure she had people around her. I think that does say something. I think Wes doing the morning round as well, exceptional communicator, trying to show what leadership would look like under him potentially. It does have the feelings of it, but I think you can't underestimate that in politics, yes, it looks like a brutal game, but actually everyone is human, everyone has friendships, everyone has relationships, and particularly with the Labour Party, where you have to literally stab someone in the chest and say, we think you should be removed, here's 80 of us who want it, and I'm the person challenging you to be leader. That is, to have the balls to do that, but also to be able to overcome years of relationships and bonding, that is really tough.
Tell us what it was like in the chamber for PMQs today.
Sombre. On the Labour side, they weren't even laughing at the usual quips and jokes. There was some even hiding their faces behind their hands. I did a point of order at the end where I pointed out the Prime Minister hadn't completely been truthful when he said that they'd always included national security in humble motions, which is humble address, which is the thing we moved today. And he kind of gave me this arm at me and said, enough, go away. He was shaking.
He actually gestured like that.
He did that. You can see it on camera. So I started my point of order, made clear it was about him. He fled the chamber, it's on camera, then did that to me to tell me to shush up. And then he had been shaking throughout all PMQs. So look, I feel for him as a man and as an individual, but his judgment throughout this has been unforgivable.
The moment when Kemi Badenoch asked that question of the sort of ongoing relationship, that I think, I mean, if he did resign over this, and I'm by no means convinced that he will, but I think there's certainly more of a possibility today than there was yesterday. That will be seen as a pivotal moment, won't it?
It will. I think he will throw Morgan McSweeney under the bus first. But yes, when Kemi asked him that question and he responded that he knew about the pre-existing relationship, you just saw and felt the room change, and you saw Labour MPs essentially see the writing on the wall. But the writing's been on the wall since Sunday. They started with the line that they couldn't withdraw his membership. Well, Jeremy Corbyn would have something to say about the Labour Party claiming they can't withdraw MPs' memberships. Then they said they couldn't bring forward legislation to strip him of his peerage. Then they had this argument that they weren't going to, or it wasn't necessary for them to refer this case to the police. Then they said today that they couldn't bring forward the humble address without an exclusion for national security grounds. And each time, and we see this in politics far too often, work it out. Work out what the writing on the wall says and get to that end point sooner. But I think it's very clear from today, there is no way the Prime Minister can tenably say that the relationship he knew was in place between Epstein and Mandelson was not so heinous that he should never have been made ambassador.
You've also been asking for details of whether Peter Mandelson is still being paid by the Foreign Office. My understanding is that he is, and the government won't tell you. How can you force them to?
It's very difficult. On the 5th of December, I wrote to the Cabinet Secretary, so I thought I'll write to the civil servants because they have a duty to reply to me. And I asked very simple questions, what was his contract? Were there any NDAs? When was he stopped being paid? Who paid his severance package, and what was the severance package? Because taxpayers have a right to know what this awful lapse of judgment has resulted in for the taxpayer. And I haven't had a response. And I raised it on Monday with Darren Jones when he was before the House of Commons answering questions. I grabbed the Minister again today and said, where are the answers to this? Now we will have them released. Thanks to the Conservative motion that we laid, we will have those documents released. But it's ridiculous they've sought to obfuscate and hide it from us.
Because I think my listeners will find it totally objectionable if he's being paid a penny since he was sacked, particularly because he was sacked for all the reasons that we know about.
I couldn't agree more, and that's why I've been asking these questions. They're not difficult questions, and they're absolutely ones that the British public has the right to say, to understand, to know. But he should never have been appointed. You know, from the day he was appointed, I was speaking out. In Hansard, I said that he shouldn't be in place. And people who want to say, oh, you've got to give people the benefit of the doubt, we knew that he had simpered to Epstein and said, you know, you shouldn't be in prison, you good friend, you good man. But we also know that when he was Deputy Prime Minister of this country, way back under the Gordon Brown government, when he flew on official business carrying the flag of our great country, he chose not to stay in a hotel, not to stay in the residence in DC or anywhere else like that. He chose to go to New York and stay in Epstein's flat while Epstein was in prison, having been convicted. And that, for me, should have been misconduct in public office way back then. So he knew both those things when he appointed this man, and yet he still did it.
I think there's only one man angrier than you in this country today, and that's Gordon Brown.
Absolutely. And look, you know, Gordon Brown asked for a review in September. I think it's extraordinary for a former Prime Minister to make that sort of intervention. And he did it privately and decently, and to have frankly just been ignored, because what we are now seeing is clearly criminal. There has been criminal activity conducted where Mandelson prioritised his relationship with the financier over his own country and even advised him how to circumnavigate the policies his own government was introducing.
Alicia, thank you very much indeed. That's Alicia Cairns, the Conservative Shadow National Security and Safeguarding Minister. More from Maggie Chambray in a moment. Let me just read you out this text from Jonathan, who says, I can't help thinking that the appointment of Mandelson was not entirely the gift of Starmer. What if the enticement of the Trump administration to bring in Mandelson as one they could do business with was too much? I think this is a conspiracy going a little bit too far here, but stranger things have happened. He continues, don't forget the desperation of the Western governments to find a way to deal with the erratic behaviour of Trump and his tariffs at the time, which genuinely felt like it threatened the economy of the world on a daily basis. A perfectly well-executed plan to compromise middle-aged men using their own weaknesses. This was not the end in itself. If you want to play in the mud pit, you may have to get a bit grubby. Enter Peter Mandelson as UK representative, with McSweeney a possible trusted conduit. It is difficult to believe that there is no one in a senior position in our security services that would not have had a chat with an American counterpart and get the lowdown of Mandelson, Epstein and Trump before the announcement of a new ambassador of the UK. I feel for Starmer. He has no blood on his hands, but had to deal with all those who did. I'm strangely confident that Keir Starmer has been caught out trying to navigate dirty politics and much, much worse. This keeps snowballing. I doubt we've heard a fraction of the full story yet. That's Johnny in Clitheroe. Well, some interesting points. I think possibly the beginning was a little bit exaggerated, but you never know. It's 7:33 on LBC News Headlines with Amelia Cox.
MPs have approved the release of documents relating to Peter Mandelson's appointment as US ambassador. Sir Keir Starmer earlier agreed to hand over sensitive files to the Intelligence Select Committee in a climb down. An email seemingly sent by Ghislaine Maxwell to Jeffrey Epstein appears to confirm a photo of Andrew Mountbatten Windsor and Virginia Giuffre is real. It appears to contradict Andrew's claim that he never met Giuffre and the image may have been doctored. And a man has admitted drugging his wife so she would not wake up while he sexually assaulted children at a summer camp. 76-year-old John Rubin previously admitted abusing 2 boys in Leicestershire last year and child cruelty towards 6 other victims. LBC weather, spells of rain lingering in the north tonight. These will also move into southern areas, a low of freezing.
This is LBC.
Octopus
Is LBC with Iain Dale. Call 0345 6060 973.
7:36 on LBC. On cross question 8, Conservative MP Sir Ashley Fox, Labour MP Mike Reeder, Dr Charlotte Proudman, human rights barrister, and Lauren McEvatt, former Conservative political advisor and podcaster. Now, before we come back to the Peter Mandelson, Keir Starmer situation, a grieving mother is campaigning to remove knives from shop shelves after her son was stabbed to death in Edinburgh. Lisa Petrie has been seeking cross-party support to change the law in Scotland in memory of her son John. Now, LBC can exclusively reveal that the Scottish Labour Party is backing her proposal. Its leader Anna Sawa will join me live in a moment, but first, LBC Scotland reporter Rebecca Brady has the details for us.
I've got a gaping hole left in my life. There was a period in my life where it was just me and John, and now this big hole's left.
Lisa Petrie's 22-year-old son John McNabb died in September after being stabbed in Leith at around 2 a.m. She found out after a flurry of texts.
I just jumped up and I drove along. He couldn't get in. He'd already left. He'd left us. So, yeah, as a mum, that's quite difficult to know that your son's lying there and you can't get to him. That'll live him for the rest of my life.
Just months after losing her eldest child, Lisa's campaigning to change the law, determined not to let John have died in vain.
My petition is to try and get knives off the shelves. Computer games are shown in empty boxes and you've got to take the empty box to the till to receive your game. Why can't that be the same for knives? We've been told from local police that young kids for a living upwards, they're stealing these knives, and this is how the knife crime's getting out of control.
The latest figures show children make up nearly a third of positive knife searches across Scotland. Lisa wants those carrying weapons to remember her son.
He was living life, loving life, and just finding his path and his way in life. We were inseparable. I used to call him my wee best pal, my wee best bud. It's a massive loss.
The petition to keep knives under lock and key has already gathered more than 52,000 signatures. LBC brought it to Scottish Labour, and the party's now promising to change the law if they win May's election. Nothing will bring John back to his mum, but for Lisa, this is his legacy.
The loss that I'm going through right now, I do not want any other family to feel that. It's totally and truly heartbreaking.
Lisa Petrie there talking to Rebecca Brady. Well, Anna Sawa, leader of the Scottish Labour Party, which is supporting this campaign, joins us now. Anna, very good evening to you. Now, everybody's heart goes out to families in this situation, but how would changing the law work practically? Because presumably at the moment you can just go into a shop or a supermarket to buy kitchen knives. How would the system change under your proposals?
Hi Ian, good to speak to you. First of all, I think it's important to put on record my thanks to Lisa Petrie. She, like so many other families who go through horrific situations, is honouring the memory of her son by campaigning to make sure other families don't have to go through what she's going through, and she is an exceptional human being. We have a rising issue with violence on our streets in Scotland and right across the UK. More and more people, as you heard in Rebecca's report there, young people are accessing these knives, and there is increased risk to safety both in schools and on the streets. And what we're proposing is to have knives behind counters, in locked cabinets, tagged, and making sure that everyone has to show ID to make sure they're over 18 before they can purchase these knives. Now, that's not going to overnight end knife crime. I wish it was as simple as that, but it will make our streets safer. It will make sure we're keeping knives, or at least trying to keep knives, out of the hands of younger people, and hopefully having fewer knife incidents so we can avoid the tragedy that Lisa and her family have had to go through.
And would this be for particular types of knives, or just including ordinary domestic cutlery?
So actually, I spoke to Lisa about this directly, and a certain sharpness of knife. I think if you think about kitchen knives rather than your knife and fork knife, there is obviously a different risk attached to each. But I think we have to look at this as robustly as possible. And of course, we'll need to have a full consultation around how that works in practice. But I want to listen to the voices of families and the experience that they've had in these situations. But the principle applies. These knives that can cause damage, that are inciting and too often being used in violent situations, shouldn't be freely available on the shelves in supermarkets, either for someone to lift and to slip in their pocket and steal, or indeed to take to a counter to purchase often when they're underage. And that's why these blades should be behind counters. They should be in locked cabinets. They should be tagged so that they do have the beeping noise that you often hear if you're going in and out of supermarkets, and that there should be age verification to make sure everyone that is purchasing one of these knives is over 18.
You know I've got to ask you about today's events surrounding Peter Mandelson and what the Prime Minister said in the Commons today. You've got very, very important elections coming up in Scotland. You're not doing brilliantly in the polls. The SNP and Reform are ahead of you. You need this like a hole in the head, don't you? What's your message to Keir Starmer tonight?
Well, look, of course, I will think every single day about the election that's going to happen on the 7th of May. But actually, this situation is more important than just one election. My thoughts are with the victims of Jeffrey Epstein, and also for everyone that feels so utterly betrayed by the actions of Peter Mandelson. He should not have been appointed US ambassador. It's right he's no longer a member of the Labour Party, and it's right that he no longer sits in the House of Lords, and he should be stripped of his titles. And it's also right that it's now been referred to the police. But the sense of betrayal from people who know him, who have encountered him, or who have had to live with the result of his actions, that horrifies me. But most importantly of all, it's the victims of Jeffrey Epstein and all those that have been victims of paedophilia or indeed violence against women and girls. This has to be robustly challenged. I imagine tonight Keir Starmer deeply, deeply regrets even thinking about appointing Peter Mandelson as ambassador, never mind appointing him as ambassador. Clearly the wrong thing to do. Clearly he was not fit for that job. Clearly he's not fit for public office. Clearly he's not welcome in our political party, and clearly he should not sit in the House of Lords.
But doesn't it really call into question the Prime Minister's judgment and how much influence Morgan McSweeney, his Chief of Staff, has over him? Because he was intending to appoint George Osborne, it seems, and Morgan McSweeney persuaded him otherwise. Now, advisers are there to advise, and Prime Ministers actually make the decision. But this doesn't reflect well on either Morgan McSweeney or the Prime Minister, does it?
So I don't know the ins and outs of the conversations in terms of the process. I don't know the questions that were asked in relation to Peter Mandelson's relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, or to get the reassurances. I think all this documentation, obviously people are desperate, and rightly desperate, to see, to make sure that the right due diligence took place. But it is clearly the case that he should not even have been considered for the role of US ambassador. He should not have been US ambassador. He is not welcome in our political party, and he should have no role in the House of Lords, and he should be stripped of his titles. And it's right that the police investigate many of the follow-up emails that you've seen in relation to his time in government and other actions that he took. I find the whole situation utterly, utterly horrifying, and I think appropriate action needs to be taken.
Anna Sawar, thank you very much indeed for joining us here on LBC tonight. That's Anna Sawar, leader of the Scottish Labour Party. Right, let's take a call, about time, from Paul in Leicester. Hello, Paul. Paul, you're on the radio, mate.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
OK, you're not on the radio, mate. Let's go to Sue in Glastonbury. Hello, Sue.
Hi, Ian.
Hi, what would you like to tell us?
I'd like to say keep Keir Starmer in the position he is. He's an ex-lawyer, so he should put in place, in law, ethical and moral framework, i.e. no reward for failure. That would mean Liz Truss would not get £100,000 a year for her failure. Severe consequences for lying, which means bankruptcy and prison. I would give you the example of Paul Novennels, who inflicted that on the sub-postmasters, and she should have a taste of her own medicine.
Well, I think there are legal cases afoot there, so I think we better be careful on that one.
OK, fair enough. But it's about time that there was... Keir Starmer is a lawyer. He's an ex-attorney general. He could easily
he's not.
Put in place...
He's not an ex-attorney general. He's never been attorney general. But I mean, you're right. He was head of the Crown Prosecution Service. So I think that's what you mean.
Then.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes. OK. So he knows about the law, and he knows about moral and ethical circumstances. And we need that in place, because otherwise we're just left with prorogues, charlatans and scoundrels who are in it for themselves and not about truth and justice for the people, not just of this country, but for around the world.
OK, Sue, thank you very much. Very clear. We'll come to more of your calls in a moment. And if you've got any questions for Aggie on the Mandelson scandal, do feel free to ask. It's 7:46.
LBC this morning on Nick Ferrari at breakfast.
What are we to make of Sir Keir Starmer's supposedly forensic barrister-like skills, former Director of Public Prosecutions, in that he placed so much trust in Peter Mandelson to become our ambassador without, apparently, an interview and without the usual vetting? Health and Social Care Secretary Wes Streeting, who joins me now.
What we've seen is evidence of a shocking betrayal of two Prime Ministers, of our country and our national interest.
Could this bring the government down?
I think that would be to let Peter Mandelson off the hook. This is his misjudgment, his misconduct, his irresponsibility.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast. Back tomorrow morning from 7. Listen on our free Global Player app or the LBC app.
At Tier
Dale on LBC.
10 to 8 on LBC. We're going to cross live to Sandringham in a moment, not to talk to him who must not be called Prince, but we'll talk to our very own Prince Henry Riley. Now, question, Aggie, from Morgan.
Prince Aggie?
Princess Aggie. Yeah, you do act like a princess a lot, I have to say. Morgan says, can you please ask Aggie, if Starmer were to go, who would replace him, and would that cut Labour's term short or only Keir's?
Really good question. Well, I say it's a really good question because it's a question actually that lots of Labour MPs are asking themselves. So when they talk about the fact that maybe there'll be a leadership challenge before May, after May, next year, then the next question or the next comment is often, just not sure who will take over. There are names in the frame. So Angela Rayner, for example, who had that moment today in the House of Commons. But the fear with her is until she sorted out or paid that bill, if indeed there is a bill, and I think there is likely to be a bill from HMRC, then it is felt that a return would be difficult for her, especially a return in terms of a leadership challenge. Then there's other people like the Deputy Labour leader, Lucy Powell, who has been talked about as well. Wes Streeting, the Health Secretary, his name's been bandied around. There's other people that people do mention, like John Healey, who's the Defence Secretary. Sometimes people say maybe he'd be a brilliant stability candidate. Shabana Mahmood, who's the Home Secretary, her name comes up a lot, but then people sometimes say, would she be able to win the membership? Because some of the things that she has done in the Home Office, some of those policies have been seen as sort of to the right or sort of right-wing policies, and the Labour membership is seen as being to the left. So there are names in the frame, but I don't think there is a sort of clear front-runner from any of those names. And to the second part of your question, Andrew, about whether or not that would cut short the time of
Morgan. It was
Morgan.
Andrew's the next one.
I think the answer is there would be massive calls for a general election, because especially, people often talk about it in terms of Angela Rayner. They would say, we did not elect Angela Rayner as Prime Minister. Of course, that's not exactly how our system works, but there would be massive calls and a lot of pressure to call a snap general election like we saw with Theresa May and others. I think they would try and resist that pressure. I think they would try very, very, very hard to resist that pressure.
Not least a lot of Labour MPs would resist that pressure because they know that they wouldn't have jobs afterwards. Right, another question coming up. But first, let's cross live to Sandringham and talk to our very own Henry Riley, who is there. Why are you there, Henry?
Ian, a county you know well, of course. This is because the prince, formerly known as Andrew, is retreating to the quiet Norfolk countryside. But not all of his neighbours are happy about his arrival. It was reported that in the dead of night on Monday, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor left his Windsor mansion, that's the 30-room Royal Lodge, and moved to Sandringham. Now, he's living temporarily in a property on the King's Estate, but is soon going to move next door to the tiny village of Wolferton, where there's around 100 people who live there, who live at a much smaller red brick cottage believed to be Marsh Farm. Now, it's understood that won't be ready for a couple of months because it's undergoing renovations. But what are locals thinking? Are they prepared to give a royal welcome to their new neighbour? This is what they told me.
So been blown up. He's a popular guy. He was. He's not so popular now, but that's with the press.
Because everybody, to a certain extent, serves a second chance. But he has to man up and own up to what he's done, admit to his wrongdoings.
I'm sure people are making welcome, even though it's on a very difficult circumstances.
To be honest, I don't think people will be overly thrilled to know that he's going to be our neighbour. But it's hard to say, isn't it? It's a very testy subject.
It's a pity he's not staying where he was.
He's not welcome in for a cup of tea?
No.
Just a 5-minute drive away is his local pub, the Black Horse Castle Rising. John Corbett is the landlord, a pretty famous pub in that Prince Edward, Princess Anne regularly pop in for a drink. Prince Harry, Prince William have also played football for that pub's football team. This is what John Corbett told me.
We try and keep a strict divide between politics. I grew up in New York, so there's a big thing: no politics, no religion.
If Andrew does want to pop by for a pint of beer, he's more than welcome, is he?
As long as he comes with cash, that's not a problem.
You're probably expecting him in at some point then, right?
I would expect him to pop in at some point, yeah. I mean, with a close proximity to Sandringham, only 5 minutes down the street. So generally speaking, I don't know where else he's going to go. So he's more than welcome here as long as he comes to spend some money.
Now, usually, Ian, you can hear a pin drop here. Everyone knows everyone. But as you can imagine, the Facebook groups, the pubs, the cafes are all full of gossip. Those noises growing louder. Actually, spending an hour outside his soon-to-be home, I saw a postman, a delivery driver and even a roofing specialist all turn right onto his drive. Ian, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor not officially moving in here until April to this property, but his presence in the surrounding villages is already being felt.
A question for you here from one of our listeners, Henry, because
yes.
they say, why do you keep saying that it's Andrew I can't find... Where's this blimmin' message gone? I can't... The Prince formerly known as Andrew. Surely it's Andrew formerly known as Prince.
Hold on, which way round did I say it? I said earlier on I said the Andrew formerly known as Prince.
No, I think you did it the other way around. Anyway,
I was on the M11 at 7 a.m. I blame that.
No one would wish that on anybody. I have to say, when you say the cottage, was it Marsh Farm it's called?
Yes.
It's not that small. It's not what you and I would think of as a cottage.
Well, I've been outside. There's no one in the window, but it's certainly bigger than my shoebox in southwest London. I'll give you that. It's got 5 bedrooms, apparently.
Well, there you go. Thank you very much, Henry. That's Henry Riley, LBC's reporter, who's off to the pub in Kings Lynn, I imagine. Right, question for Aggie from Charlie. We're well aware of how Conservatives do leadership challenges with the 1922 committee. How do Labour conduct leadership challenges?
This is my favourite question. Thank you so much, Charlie.
Briefly, if you could.
Briefly, if I could. So, to challenge a sitting Labour leader, you need to be named yourself and you need to have 80 named backers, and that is the only way that sort of challenge begins. And then if, for example, Keir Starmer also wanted to stand, he would need the same to be in that process, and then other people could also get into the race by having that number too. They would still need that 80 MPs, 80 named MPs too. So it's very different from putting an anonymous letter in and that process being started, as we saw with the Conservatives. But it's exactly the same process as the one that we saw with the deputy Labour leadership contest, which the final was between Bridget Phillipson, the Education Secretary, and Lucy Powell. Lucy Powell, of course, won.
Joe in Brighton. Joe, you've got 90 seconds before we have to say goodbye to you.
Oh, okay. It's just basically I want to ask. I feel that Keir Starmer's been held to higher scrutiny than Nigel Farage. No one's investigating who these American businesses he seems to be representing, as you mentioned in the Senate. No one's going on about scrutinising any of his MPs' background interests. So I think Keir Starmer should just stand up for this and don't give in, and people shouldn't vote themselves out because what's to come is worse.
What companies are you talking about? Because an MP has to register all of their income with the Register of Members' Interests, which, as I understand it, Nigel Farage has done, albeit a little bit late.
But he said at the Senate hearing that he represents American business interests. We don't know who that American business interest is. He said it. Go back and look at the Senate where he says, I've been here many times over the years to represent American businesses.
Well, I doubt whether he put it in the words that you're putting in his mouth there, but I will go back and look at that, Joe. Thank you very much indeed. Aggie, thank you. You are released. Because we've got somebody sitting in your chair for the next hour. Because it is Cross Question, and on Wednesday's Cross Question we have Sir Ashley Fox, Conservative MP for Bridgwater. He's a former leader of the Conservative group in the European Parliament. Mike Reeder is Labour MP for Northampton South, and I'm going to reveal what Mike Reeder does in his spare time. That will frighten him. Dr. Charlotte Proudman is a human rights barrister who's the founder of Right to Equality, an organisation seeking to remove sexist inequalities from the law. And Lauren McKevitt is a former Conservative political advisor and a podcaster on Welsh politics. They're all going to be joining me to answer your questions. 0345 6060 973 is the number to call.
On your radio, on the LBC app, and
Play LBC.
Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 8 o'clock, MPs have approved the release of documents relating to Peter Mandelson's appointment as US Ambassador. The Prime Minister has been forced to hand sensitive files to the Intelligence Committee after pressure from his own MPs. Alicia Kearns, Conservative Shadow Minister, told LBC Mandelson should never have been appointed by the PM.
We knew that he had simpered to Epstein and said, you shouldn't be in prison, you good friend, you good man. We also know that when he was Deputy Prime Minister of this country, when he flew on official business, he chose to go to New York and stay in Epstein's flat while Epstein was in prison. He knew both those things when he appointed this man, and yet he still did it.
An email seemingly sent by Ghislaine Maxwell appears to confirm the infamous photo of Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor and Virginia Giuffre is real. Andrew claimed he never met Giuffre and that the image may have been doctored. He denies wrongdoing. A 76-year-old former summer camp leader who sexually assaulted 2 boys and poisoned others has admitted drugging his wife to make her sleep through his attacks. John Reuben will be sentenced on Friday. And the Princess of Wales has spoken of how a cancer journey has moments of fear and exhaustion. Kate, who's in remission, has released a personal video message to mark World Cancer Day. In the city, the FTSE 100's closed up 87 points at 10,402. The pound buys $1.36 and €1.15. LBC weather, spells of rain lingering in the north, moving south tonight, a low of 0. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Daryl Jackson.
Taking antibiotics when you don't need them puts you and your family at risk of a longer and more severe illness. Always take your doctor's advice. Search NHS antibiotics.
You saw me, walking along the beach. You watched me turn round the headland, and the tide, it cut me off. The rocks were wet, too wet to climb, so I panicked. But you didn't. You dialed 999 and asked for the Coast Guard.
Coast Guard.
And I just want to say, whoever you are, thank you.
In an emergency at the coast, call 999 and ask for the Coast Guard.
I'm a real snack monster. But Mum and Dad says all that munching isn't good for me. Around half the sugar we eat comes from unhealthy snacks and sugary drinks. If you want to change from a snack monster to a snack star, search Change for Life for loads of healthy snacking ideas.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation. Cross Question with Iain Dale.
Hello, very good evening. It's 8:02 on Wednesday evening on LBC. It's time for Cross Question. On the panel tonight, sitting to my left, regular, I was almost going to say a veteran of the programme, but that might be unkind. Dr. Charlotte Proudman, a human rights barrister, founder of Right to Equality, an organisation seeking to remove sexist inequalities from the law. Next to her is Sir Ashley Fox, Conservative MP for Bridgwater and former leader of the Conservative group in the European Parliament. To my right, Lauren McEvert, former Conservative political advisor and co-host of the Welsh Politics podcast, which does what it says on the tin. And next to her, making his debut on the programme, is Mike Reeder, Labour MP for Northampton South. Welcome to you, Mike. We would love to hear some questions from you. 0345 6060 973 is the number to call. You can WhatsApp on that number. You can text 84850. And, of course, you can watch us on Global Player, the LBC app, and the LBC YouTube channel.
Call 0345 6060 973. Text 84850. Cross Question. Watch live on both Global Player and the new LBC app. This is LBC.
Now, can we clear something up from the beginning? Because I've got a text here from Paul who says, as usual from Tory Boy, that's Andrew Pearce, not me, you have 2 Tories on your panel. How is that impartial? Well, first of all, I don't book the guests. I might have an influence over the guests, but I don't actually book them. But second of all, we don't book guests like that. We book 2 people on the right, 2 people on the left. So it's usually one politician on the right, one politician on the left, and then somebody else from the left or the right. I think that's completely impartial, but obviously we've offended you, Paul. Sorry about that. Right, Scott in West Hampstead has the first question. Can Sir Keir Starmer regain his authority before the May elections? And if so, how? Charlotte.
Well, I think after the Lord Mandelson debacle, although I'm not sure how much longer we're going to be calling him Lord Mandelson, I think that there's an extremely valid question, and one in which we see that his position is perhaps becoming more untenable as the days go on. Today, in particular, I was extremely disappointed as a barrister representing survivors of sexual violence to learn that, in fact, Keir Starmer, when deciding to appoint Peter Mandelson as ambassador to the US, was aware of the fact that he'd had a continuing relationship with a convicted sex offender. It's important that we remember he was convicted in 2008 for procuring a child for prostitution, so effectively paedophilia. And I think one of the great hypocrisies, particularly that we see in politics, is that many parliamentarians say we stand with survivors. We're deeply concerned by Epstein and his actions towards victims, even including Andrew. And yet they're very happy to associate with people around him, and not only associate with them, but actually put them in positions of power and trust. So I think Keir Starmer has a lot of questions to answer. And I think that when it comes to the documents that led the way to the vetting of Mandelson, I think it's important to make those publicly available. In fact, I'd like to see what went on when it come to vetting Peter Mandelson in order to restore public trust and confidence, not only within the system, but particularly within the Labour Party and our government that we voted for.
So for you, that the key moment today was when Kemi Badenoch asked that question about, well, effectively, what did you know and when did you know it? And Keir Starmer said, well, yes, we did know that he had this I think he said ongoing. No, Kemi Badenoch used the word ongoing,
yes,
didn't she?
She did.
And he said, well, yes, we did.
Yes.
And when I saw that, I thought, she's got him.
She absolutely did have him. And I saw Labour MPs' faces drop, and certainly mine did. I was utterly astounded by that. One of the other things that I think is very hypocritical and perhaps reflects very poorly on the Metropolitan Police Service is that when we learned that supposedly Lord Mandelson had access to sensitive material that he allegedly passed on to convicted sex offender Epstein, the police took immediate and swift action. He's now subject to a criminal investigation. And yet, when it came to Andrew, who had allegedly sexually assaulted Virginia Jeffrey and also allegedly had used a police officer to dig up dirt on a sex trafficking victim, he wasn't subject to a police investigation, certainly not a meaningful one. When it comes to money, the police take action. When it comes to victims, well, it seems as if it's actually not as important. It's not in the public interest. I think, if anything, Andrew should be subject to a police investigation, and Keir Starmer should be pushing for that.
Mike Reader, normally when someone makes their debut on the programme, I come to them last on the first question, just so they can ease in. But I think we need to come to you on this one, if you don't mind. What's your reaction to the question, can Sir Keir regain his authority before the May elections, and if so, how?
I mean, today particularly, but the past few days of the revelations have been shocking, Iain, and quite disgusting. I've never met Peter Mandelson. I joined Parliament 18 months ago from working in industry. I've not been in that kind of Westminster bubble, but it's very clear there was a breakdown in leadership. There was a kind of institutional blindness to some of these issues. Clearly the vetting wasn't good enough. Clearly, Mandelson, we know, lied and lied and lied, and was a very good liar that convinced a lot of people. Keir has acted very quickly to, first of all, in September, when he removed him as the ambassador, and now he's been removed from the Labour Party, studded down for the Lords. But I'm genuinely really sad, because as a new MP, I had no idea how low people's trust in politicians was. And every single day, things like this erode that, and we get that erosion of democracy, and that's the really worrying thing, is alongside making sure that we are protecting victims and we're dealing with this institutional liar, Peter Mandelson.
Were you in PMQs today?
No, I wasn't actually. I watched it from my office. I'm not a PMQs fan.
But therefore, you will have seen the look on your colleagues' faces. I mean, when he gave that answer, yes, we did. I mean, what's your instinctive reaction?
I didn't know what to say. In the office, we were shocked. I mean, Wes Streeting put it very well earlier. There is no guilty by association. We've got to be very careful about what did Keir know. We don't know that, but clearly Peter Mandelson pulled the wool over Keir's eyes and the vetting team's eyes and those around Keir's eyes. And it's right now that documents are going to be released. There will be a police investigation.
Well, they're not, apparently, because the Met say they can't release them because it could prejudice the investigation.
Well, they'll be released. I think they'll be released when it won't prejudice the investigation, and that's the right thing.
That could be months.
It could be, and what we have to make sure is that there is justice.
So the Met could have saved Keir Starmer's skin.
I mean, I wouldn't put it like that at all. I think actually what we have to do is make sure there is justice. There is justice in what is potential, as we've described in the Chamber today, as treason, of insider trading, of acts when Peter Mandelson was an MP that, quite frankly, should never ever have happened and were potentially covered up, and people were aware that they were happening.
But we have a Prime Minister who knew of Mandelson's ongoing relationship with a convicted paedophile, and Charlotte, I think, can quite reasonably ask, well, how is that tenable? And it has to call into question his judgment, and indeed the judgment of Morgan McSweeney, who clearly persuaded the Prime Minister to appoint Mandelson. Because we're told from the New Statesman today, a very authoritative article by Alvarez, that actually Keir Starmer never particularly liked Peter Mandelson. So he's obviously been persuaded to do it. He wanted to appoint somebody else. I mean, you must be bereft at that turn of events.
It is very difficult to see this playing out as it's playing out. When I was a candidate, we had an away weekend, and Keir came to speak to us, and he talked about his time when he was in the Crown Prosecution Service, and he talked about how, when there's expensive scandal, he put MPs in jail, whether they were Labour, whether they're Conservative, whatever colour they were. And that was kind of the integrity I saw in Keir Starmer then, and that's what we need to see now, is that integrity, that no matter who it is around him that has done wrong, that justice is found for victims, and that those who have lied, those who have potentially caused treason, insider trading, are brought to justice.
What we're hearing at LBC this evening is from many Labour MPs through Aggie Chambray and Natasha Clark, our political editor and deputy political editor. They are hearing from countless Labour MPs who are saying, well, this has to be the final straw. We cannot put up with this much longer. Now, you're not here as a commentator. You're an active participant. But do you understand how your fellow MPs feel, and how do you feel?
I can really understand the anger, actually, and genuinely there is a feeling of real anger and being let down by some of those at the top of the party within the PLP. And there are people who are, obviously talking to journalists off record or on record, but there is a lot of anger, a lot of frustration, all off the record. There's no one come out, so no one's had the guts to come out and say
which I actually
this stuff.
am slightly surprised by, because I remember when there was a previous sort of little spat where Keir Starmer was in a lot of trouble, and there were 3 or 4 MPs. I remember driving down the M5 listening to Jo White, who is not one of the usual suspects, so I think she's head of the Red Wall group of Labour MPs, saying, well, he's got until the May elections, then he'll have to go. I was thinking, wow, but we haven't heard that extent today. Ashley Fox, now, were you in PMQs today?
Yes, I was.
So you were sitting directly opposite Labour MPs.
Yes.
Describe their faces.
They were gobsmacked. And as I watched that, I felt pride in my leader, Kemi Badenoch, for a forensic intelligent attack. She showed real backbone. And
there were no histrionics, were there?
None at all. I mean, she can do the bravura attack. She's done that before. She's taken Rachel Reeves apart. This was calm and forensic, and she was brilliant. And in fact, Starmer obfuscated for the first 2, trying not to answer the question. I'm going to take one point with Mike. He was very honest with us, but he said Starmer acted quickly. No, he hasn't. He had to have this dragged out of him. And of course, he either had to be truthful or mislead the House. So he said, yes, he was aware of this ongoing relationship. And what this points to is his poor judgment. And this is what we look for in our leaders. Do they make the right judgment calls? So I look at my leader, Kemi, and I think, yes, you make the right judgment calls. I think there are Labour MPs tonight who are livid because they know that Starmer is guilty of a succession of poor judgments, appointing Morgan McSweeney, the protégé of Mandelson, letting Mandelson have a veto over who was a Labour candidate and who was not, giving him an advance sight of the list. So Mandelson has been injected into Starmer's government. That poison courses through it. And that, I think, is why Mike and others are so angry, because it demonstrates Keir Starmer's complete lack of judgment in this whole situation.
OK. Lauren McEver, you were a special advisor in a previous Conservative government, and you've been a sort of acute observer of politics since then. I mean, do you sense the same sort of end of days feeling here that there was in the Boris Johnson government, for example?
I think it's very interesting because obviously the Labour Party have a very different relationship to their backbench than the Conservative Party do in government. It's a very different mechanism to try and get rid of people, and it's fascinating to see whether or not Labour backbenchers and Labour ministers may cobble together to try and get rid of him. There are a set of really incredibly difficult elections coming up for Labour in May. From my own political background, which obviously is in Wales, Llywelyn Morgan doesn't want Keir Starmer anywhere near Wales. If he comes near Chepstow, she's going to start blowing a gasket. Labour are looking like they're going to get the routing of their lives in the part of the United Kingdom where they have been returned again and again and again ever since universal suffrage. The first Labour MP ever returned, Keir Hardie, he's named after him, 2 Keirs, and they look like they're going to get a wipeout in Wales. Do you make a decision as a strategist within the Labour Party, as someone thinking about the wider movement, the wider programme, rather than just the individual? Do you say, well, we need someone new to take us into those elections to try and turn the boat around? Or do you say, well, we need someone to take the hit for this and then we get someone new afterwards? Or do you say we can just ride it out? A lot of this is poisoned by the Morgan McSweeney problem. I wonder if Keir Starmer had booted Morgan last September when he booted Mandelson, if he would have been at least somewhat better isolated from this now. But this admission today that, yes, he knew things that aren't good, that should have been disqualifying features and weren't, sending out the Chief Secretary of the Treasury earlier over the weekend, Darren Jones, to say, well, we inherited a Tory vetting system.
We should just explain, because I'm very conscious that not everyone who's listening is as tagged into Westminster politics as we are. Morgan McSweeney is the Chief of Staff to Keir Starmer. He led the Labour Party election campaign hugely successfully. But I think he's come into government. He succeeded Sue Gray, who at least knew how to pull the levers of power. But I think he's struggled with coping. He has,
and what's interesting about being an advisor in government is often the best campaigners don't make the best government advisors, and like the vice versa is true as well. Sometimes the best government advisors don't make the best campaigners. It's not necessarily a transferable skill set. But what I've been thinking about a lot over the course of the last 4 days is that Keir Starmer, before the last election, threw all of his toys out of the pram when Rishi Sunak appointed Tim Barrow as the next US ambassador. Tim Barrow is a lifetime career civil servant. He'd been in Brussels for years. He'd been in charge of our very dangerous and sort of hard negotiations with Europe for years. And Keir Starmer blew a gasket and said, that man's a closet Tory, and I should get to appoint the next ambassador, and how dare you, and it's going to be my choice, and it's my lever to pull, not yours. You're on the way out, how dare you? And Karen Pierce was then asked to extend a little bit, and Keir Starmer got his wish to appoint his chosen ambassador. And his choice was this guy, who is not just well known about this. I take issue with the fact that this was documents that aren't in the public domain. There's a picture of Peter Mandelson in a Jeffrey Epstein sweatshirt from 2009 post-conviction that appeared in the Mail, I want to say like 10 years ago or so. So the idea that everybody didn't know he was still mates with the guy is absolutely for the birds. So the idea that, Keir Starmer needed to wait for a briefing to make his mind up.
I think that's the point, isn't it? There is an institutional blindness across Westminster of this type of people. That's 10 years ago that's happened, and people have turned a blind eye for years.
Yeah, and there's
right?
further blind eye turning now, and I think Charlotte was really interesting mentioning the victims here. Obviously, Epstein was predominantly trafficking in girls and young women. But there are emails that relate to Mandelson that are really weird about
there was
Cuban
one
Americans
that I saw today.
And Cuban American or brown. There are some really weird sexual overtones in some of those emails that need further investigation. And there are victims beneath those that I think probably are underrepresented in what has gone on conviction-wise in the last couple of years.
And the payments were made to Mandelson's partner.
And this is quite, again, who, by the way, never qualified as an osteopath. The Osteopaths Council have come out tonight and said he never qualified as an osteopath. And underneath all of this it's not actually insider trading. It's something called market abuse, where you leak information because you're not trading off yourself.
It's abuse of public office as well.
It's abuse of public office, but it's also market abuse when you're...
Just before we wrap this up, Mike, I'm going to throw you a hospital pass of a question, I'm afraid. Do you think it is time for Morgan McSweeney to be sacked?
I don't think I'd ever call publicly for anyone to be sacked. From my time in industry before I was an MP, you work as one leadership group, you work as one organisation, you deal with problems in the right way, and publicly calling for someone to be sacked on the basis of evidence that comes out, it's still coming out now, I think is premature. But I trust that if Morgan has done wrong, he will step down. And I trust that there will be a due process within the party and within his role within government. If he's found to have lied, if he's found to have misled people, if he's found to use undue influence to get Mandelson into role, then he will be removed from office.
And if Wes Streeting, Angela Rayner, Shabana Mahmood, if one of them sidled up to you in the voting lobby tomorrow and said, now's the time, Mike, isn't it?
Who's to say they've not already done it? No, I'm joking.
Oh, I like this guy. Have they?
No.
Damn. It's 8:20.
This is LBC.
When you
Leading Britain's conversation. Cross Question with Iain Dale. Alexa, send a comment to LBC.
8:22 on LBC. On the panel tonight, Conservative MP Sir Ashley Fox, Dr Charlotte Proudman, human rights barrister, Laura McKevitt, former Conservative advisor and podcaster, not former podcaster, she's a current podcaster for the Welsh Politics podcast, and Mike Reader, Labour MP for Northampton South, who has a hidden talent, ladies and gentlemen, because I remember when I was doing the Many podcasts with Jackie Smith, we got an email from one day from somebody who would ask our listeners, what's the weirdest place where you listen to the podcast? And this guy said, I listen to it while I'm open swimming in the River Dart. Ladies and gentlemen, Mike Reader, Labour MP for Northampton South.
Yes,
I mean, that's an unusual pastime.
So I was always a swimmer when I was younger, and I got into open water swimming. And there's something about, I might do 2 or 3 hours worth of swimming, and listening to a podcast was just a way to get through it. And I did what's called the Dart 10K, so it's a 10-kilometre swim down the River Dart, and you joined me. You also joined me in the dock-to-dock 15K in London, and I swam through the London docks 15 kilometres, 5 hours it took me.
My goodness. 5 hours swimming?
Yeah, non-stop. I cried at the end. I was so exhausted.
Oh, God,
Never again.
I don't blame you. Well, it's a rare talent. Right, let's move on to another question from Steve in Penn in Buckinghamshire. Steve, go ahead.
Hi, Iain. Yes, my question is, given all the scandal around Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, is it time now for the royal family to have a severe haircut? That's to say, there's a king, a queen, an heir and a spare, and that's your lot.
What, you cut Princess Anne out of it?
I certainly have.
Oh dear, that would be a radical haircut, if I may say so. Ashley Fox.
Well, I'm a great fan of the monarchy. I think the King took the right action with Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. I think the royal family now comprises of hard-working members, so I definitely wouldn't get rid of the Princess Royal, and I wouldn't want to get rid of the Duke or Duchess of Edinburgh, because I think they serve the family well. So I think at the moment we've got a smaller royal family that works hard and does our country proud.
Because I don't know the answer to this, but I don't think like Eugenie and Beatrice, Sarah Ferguson...
They're not members of the
well, they are members of the royal family, but they don't get any money, do they?
No, they don't.
Charlotte?
I don't know whether... they certainly get money, don't they, in indirect ways, because they're invited to speak at events, they're publicly platformed, and we know from the emails that we've seen that Epstein would ask whether Fergie's daughters, so Eugenie or Beatrice, could show either him or other individuals around Buckingham Palace or royal premises. So they're using their position and their status, one assumes, to gain other privileges, potentially money, resources and so forth. I'm a Republican, so I don't believe in the monarchy. And I think that if we are to have a monarchy, I certainly think it should be subject to some sort of vote and democratic process.
Not monarchy then, is it?
You'd prefer
No.
President Tony Blair, would you?
I would.
Okay.
If people have voted for him, then yes, I'd prefer President Tony Blair. I'm not sure that Tony Blair would be the person that was voted in, but yes, I would prefer that. I think that's only right.
Just
As someone who believes in democracy, firmly believes in a representative democracy, I don't understand how we've arrived at this position in 2026 where we still have a monarchy, but there we go. I think, if I may say so, when it comes to Andrew specifically, and I know obviously that's the talk of
Well, we're actually going to
the
come
day.
into him in a moment, so do you want to hold your horses on
I can hold my horses on that.
I'm speculating about who might contest a first UK presidential election.
Ooh.
So saying Tony Blair,
Well, if Blair
possibly.
stood, of course, Gordon Brown would stand as well.
Gordon Brown, I think, would be brilliant, actually.
We could have Liz Truss. We could have Timmy Mallet.
I'm not sure Liz Truss would last long enough. She'd last longer than a cucumber this time.
Okay, Mike.
Do you know, before I was an MP, I probably would have said yes. We dramatically need to reduce the size of the royal family. I was not maybe on the same level of Republican as Charlotte, but certainly.
But having joined the establishment,
well, yes, I'm very fortunate to have some democratically elected, of course. Very fortunate to have visits. And I've had Princess Anne. She's a patron of shoe and boot makers of that institution. She came and went around to one of the amazing shoe factories in Northampton. I've also had someone who I think was about 30th in line to the throne, who I'd say, well, actually, do they need all this kind of like grace and favour that they get? But actually, the impact it had on people when they came and they opened a statue. It wasn't a big gesture, but to give their time, and the impact it had on particularly on the children that were there who'd been involved in the project. I think, rather than getting rid of the royals, yes, there has to be questions about the cost, there has to be questions about accountability, but actually they are an institution that brings a lot of joy to people in a world that's pretty grotty right now. So I think there is a role for the royals, but I think there are questions over the cost and kind of the scrutiny that they go through, particularly those lower down the leagues.
Lauren?
The royal family's been slimmed dramatically already, and there's a list of about 5 of them that are the top list of 5 that can sub in for the monarch in giving out honours, in doing knighting and things like that. And Andrew Mountbatten Windsor was removed from that I think at the point at which King Charles became king, he removed Andrew Mountbatten Windsor from that. The Princess Royal's children are not involved in the actual day-to-day anything. I think the children outside of King Charles's children don't receive anything from the civil list in any way. They're financed, if they're financed by a member of the royal family, by Charles himself rather than anything else. And I think Mike's right. They bring a slightly otherworldliness to some public things, and I think we all sort of take for granted. They go to the opening of an envelope about 700 times a week, and it's a fairly, they're going to pull a little curtain to open a plaque again and again and again.
You can't feel sorry for them for that. I'd rather be doing that than working in a supermarket on minimum wage.
I let you finish without interject, so I'd appreciate it if you let me finish without interjecting. They bring in an awful lot in tourism, which the Republicans obviously don't like very much, which is why Charlotte's rolling her eyes at me yet again. But I do think that they are worth keeping in general as a concept. And having worked within government, having been a special advisor, there is this concept called reader number 1, where ultimately what you write ends up in the top guy's box, which is not Keir Starmer's box, it's King Charles's box, and previously the Queen's box. And there was a feeling within senior civil servants that this focused minds a little bit. If this is going to end up on the Queen's desk or the King's desk, this is not just a temporal politician subject to the slimeballness and the slings and arrows of public discourse that politicians are. This is going to the top desk, itself. Focus the minds a little bit, and I think that's a good thing.
I don't know why anything arrives on the desk of King Charles when he wasn't voted in to that position, frankly, from the Prime Minister. He shouldn't have any say at all in politics or legislative governance or otherwise. I think when it comes to the concept of the royal family, I'm very much against the concept of inequality, particularly class inequality, and that's exactly what the royal family epitomise.
And yet your inequality thing doesn't actually stretch to pitying Andrew's daughters, who can be viewed to be victims as much as anybody else, being pimped out by their parents to one of the most appalling men on the planet. Instead, you would cast no sympathy on them whatsoever.
I don't think they're victims at all. Apparently, they were the ones that were encouraging their father to go on to Newsnight. They said that he would do very well.
No, that's encouraging their father to go on Newsnight. That's not necessarily encouraging their father to email Epstein about them.
It was important, apparently, that the public would be able to see what a wonderful man he was, and that, in fact, he wasn't actually so involved in
But that's different
Epstein.
to encouraging
Very
Epstein
different.
conversations, and they can be viewed as victims there. They were very young when some of these emails were being sent.
I don't think that justifies the monarchy remaining in place at all.
No, but it does justify sympathy on behalf of young girls.
I don't think that...
Or are you saying that there's a strata of young girls who get sympathy and others who don't?
Why would it suggest it involves sympathy for Beatrice and Eugenie?
Would you not sympathise with anybody whose mother had emailed a paedophile about them?
Of course she shouldn't be emailing a paedophile
But you
about
have
them,
no sympathy
or
for their
sharing
daughters.
photographs of them.
You have no
I don't
sympathy for
think
the
that
girls?
I have no sympathy for the fact that
So
part
there are
of the
some
royal
victims
family,
that you don't like?
I have no sympathy for the fact that they're part of the royal family. I don't understand why this has become a conversation about victimhood, though. Are you suggesting that Epstein's victims are on par with Beatrice and Eugenie?
I'm saying that all victims who are people who are unwittingly and without permission involved in anything to do with Epstein's circle are deserve sympathy.
OK, and have you seen Beatrice and Eugenie describe themselves as victims?
I don't know that they're going to willingly sit themselves in front of a microphone ever to have that conversation.
Well, perhaps they should have thought about that before they encouraged their father to be on.
Anytime they like. But
Thank
not by
you.
Charlotte.
Yeah, apparently not.
Right, more questions in just a few moments here on LBC. It's 8:31 news headlines with Darryl Jackson.
The government will be forced to hand over files relating to Lord Mandelson's appointment as US ambassador to the Intelligence Committee. Ministers had insisted information about national security be withheld. An email seemingly from Ghislaine Maxwell appears to confirm a photograph of Andrew Mountbatten Windsor with Virginia Giuffre is real. It appears to contradict his suggestion that the image may have been doctored. He denies wrongdoing. And a man who poisoned children with sweets at a summer camp before sexually assaulting two of them has admitted drugging his wife. 76-year-old John Rubin did it, so she slept through the abuse. LBC weather, spells of rain lingering in the north tonight. These will move to southern areas later, a low of 0.
This is LBC.
You know that
Question with Iain Dale on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
It's 8:34 on LBC. With us on the panel are Sir Ashley Fox, Conservative MP for Bridgewater, Mike Reader, Labour MP for Northampton South, Dr. Charlotte Proudman, human rights barrister and podcaster and former special advisor to various. Is it various Conservative companies?
No, it's just the one.
Just the one. Lauren McEvitt. Right, let's go to the text question from Jeff in Salisbury. Why is this country so bad at rehabilitating criminals? Now, a committee of MPs has said the probation service is failing after the number of offenders who were released from prison on probation but were then charged with another serious crime increased by 55% in only 3 years. Well, I suspect, Charlotte, you've probably got more experience in this regard than anybody else on the panel, so let's come to you first on this. Why are we so bad at rehabilitating criminals?
I mean, the cost of reoffending is around 20.9 billion a year, so financially extremely expensive, and that doesn't even include, of course, the consequences for people who are affected by someone reoffending in terms of the crimes that they might commit. But having worked with people that have committed crimes, and particularly from my experience as a barrister working with victims who've been subject to criminal activity, I mean, as I say, lifelong in terms of the impact. We are extremely bad at prioritising probation services, and those that do work in probation have described the vicarious trauma that they experience, and we know that they're working at around, I think it's 118% capacity, and there's a dearth in the number of people that actually want to work in the probation service, and it's perhaps not surprising given how underpaid it is and what a valuable resource it is. I think it's really important to praise those that do work within that service, but we know, for example, Serco, when it comes to tagging, not always available, long delays, not always monitored either, which can result in high rates of recidivism. What do we do to tackle that? Well, as always, it comes to government resources, doesn't it, and priorities, and making sure that there is more funding available to prevent reoffending. But unfortunately, it just seems as if the public will is not there. We have this whole narrative around tough on crime and preventing further criminal activity from happening, but we don't actually tackle the root cause of that. And one of them is poverty and intergenerational cycles of poverty, care proceedings. We know many children that live in care will often go on to commit criminal offences. Not all of them, of course. Many do go on to have perfectly stable and stable lives. And I've had the great pleasure of working with young children that have been through care proceedings and seen them come out as adults. But some of them do struggle, and the support just isn't available, particularly for care leavers. And so we need to be working with those, I think, who are particularly vulnerable as children and young adults to tackle it before they potentially go on to commit criminal activity, and also encourage those people to get back into work, to have housing, to be able to get an education. So incredibly important.
Ashley, it is true, isn't it, that the previous Conservative government decimated the probation service, and that has had a really dramatic effect on the amount of recidivism amongst criminals.
Well, of course, rehabilitation is only one of the aims of the criminal justice system, and we should attempt to do that. But of course, perhaps more important is justice for the victims of that crime, punishment of the wrongdoer, and detaining them so that there's a period during which they're unable to commit further crimes. And I did think Charlotte was sort of guilty of speaking rather too much about the rights and needs of the criminal. I think our focus should be on the victims. I have many constituents who come to me complaining about how lightly the criminals are treated. For serious assaults, they're not detained. Far too many are not imprisoned. And in fact, this government is going to ensure that almost anyone sentenced to less than a year will have a suspended sentence. And they intend that far more criminals go through the probation system, which the report from the Public Accounts Committee has said isn't serving its purpose. They're making too many wrong decisions.
Fine, but if rehabilitation works, then there are fewer criminal offences, fewer criminals out there that can cause harm to others. And yet the number of probation officers is falling. I mean, I remember a year ago, I got into an Addison Lee cab And the driver, we just got into conversation, and he told me that he had been a probation officer, and he told me why he wasn't a probation officer any longer, and that he preferred driving an Addison Lee cab.
I should think it's a really tough job.
And he was a really, really impressive man. And I was thinking, what a loss to the system you are. And it was because he could not cope with the caseload. And it wasn't because he was lazy. He was totally committed to it. But he said, I ended up knowing that I wasn't doing my job properly.
Yeah,
that's a very sad state of affairs.
That is a sad state, but I come back to the fact that rehabilitation is only one of the purposes of the criminal justice system.
It ought to be a primary one.
Well, that's your opinion, isn't it?
Well, I would say that actually,
but I would say that punishing the guilty, bringing justice to victims, and ensuring that those criminals are unable to commit.
It's not one or the other. It's surely any developed country should have a criminal justice system that does all the things that you've been articulating.
And that's a fair point, but that costs an awful lot of money. There's always a question over where resources go. I'm not sure that vast amounts more money on the probation service and rehabilitating prisoners is where the public mood is.
I mean, there was a much shorter answer from Ashley, which was yes to your question. The report found, and it's a cross-party committee, including Ashley's colleagues, found that from 2021 to 2024-25, particularly, there were systematic failings in the probation service, some of that leading back to the failed privatisation in 2014, particularly focused on, as you talk about capacity, but culture in the probation service, that there was a extremely poor culture, which led to mistakes, which led to a lack of focus and empathy within the system, but also a lack of focus on rehabilitation. And so that's why Labour has committed to £700 million investment. That's a 45% increase on what was provided under the Conservatives, recruiting 1,300 more probation officers. But actually, in my constituency, I see great things like community payback, which are alternative ways of providing that service. And just in Northamptonshire and Peterborough, they're recruiting an extra 26 teams because it keeps people out of prison. They can, for low-level crimes, they can contribute back to their community, pay their debt to society. I went out on a scheme this summer and I chatted to a guy. He thought someone was breaking into his house. He was too aggressive in that protection of his house. It turned out the person wasn't, and he was found guilty, and his punishment was 8 weeks of community service through the community payback scheme. That's the great stuff the probation service does, and we should be more of, because it gives people a chance to pay back to their community, pay their due to society, and then move on with their lives.
Lauren?
I think some of what needs to be looked at more broadly by policymakers in the justice arena is the types of crimes that are being reoffended principally. So 25% of domestic abusers will go on to offend again. 50% of victims of domestic abuse will have a second incident within 12 months. There are 188,000 cases of stalking and harassment, which is where an awful lot of the domestic abuse caseload. 188,000 cases in the year to stalking and harassment in the year to the end of 25, England and Wales. Those are individuals for whom clearly slamming them away for 2.5 years is not doing it. And we need to be having a conversation about whether or not someone who is a habitual domestic abuser is going to be rehabilitated, or whether or not we inflict this on the victim to release this person back into society, who's going to specifically hunt them down as an individual to victimize them again, and whether or not recidivism in that area is at such a degree that actually we should be looking at sentencing increases for domestic abuse perpetrators. There are also things that are much lower grade problems within the justice system where we need to look at whether or not we're doing it right. I'm thinking in particular of, and Charlotte will be able to tell me the name of this, I think, but when someone, for example, has been in hospital for 6 weeks, misses paying their road tax and automatically gets a slam on something, even though he was in the hospital, there's a name for that automatic system. And there can be people who repeat within that we should probably be looking at some of those things as well, as to whether or not that's actual recidivism or bad paperwork or dealing with a system that needs to be reformed somewhat.
Let's just take this follow-up text from Rico in Kingsbury. Are the jury trial plans going to be the next Labour U-turn? Now, the retired senior judge, Sir Brian Leveson, who's the architect of the plans which inspired Labour's reforms to the court system, has warned that failure to reduce the Crown Court backlog is not an option, because if we fail, the system quietly descends into chaos. Up to 60 Labour MPs could rebel against the government plans, which go further than what Sir Brian originally recommended. Are you going to be one of them, Mike?
So I find the term U-turn very interesting. How can you U-turn on what was essentially an announcement and a consultation, right, on this? And the minister is very clear. There is a plan. The ministry now listens to people's views, including Leveson, including the opposition, and will come forward with legislation that reflects that feedback.
Well,
Mike, it's not
hang
a
on a minute.
It's not a consultation. This is the Lammy received Leveson's report. He announced this is what they're going to do. And in fact, the Courts Minister, Sarah Sackville, actually said she would wish to get rid of jury trials even if there wasn't a backlog. But in answer to your question, yes, there is going to be a U-turn on this. You can see it coming. And it's a mark of Lammy's stupidity that he's persisting with this plan when it's perfectly obvious, looking at the benches opposite, that there's going to be such a massive rebellion that this plan will not work. And it won't make any difference to the court backlog anyway. That's the most remarkable thing.
You very skillfully didn't answer my question, Mike.
I don't know what you're talking about, Iain.
You could do it in one word, couldn't you?
I could do it in one word, yeah.
He's still young enough in the house to be scared of his whip. Let's leave him alone.
I've had 3 whips so far being an MP, and they've all been lovely.
You're supposed to say that. It's in the briefing.
Is it? My whip's probably listening right now, and I'll get a text later. Yeah, get a text later. I actually think it is. The government's put something out, they're going to listen, they'll respond. I find it a bit sad that actually this is how politics works, is that you can't listen, adjust, and move on. That's how
David Lammy was very definitive. This is what we're going to do. In a way, that's admirable. I like politicians who say, right, our view is this, follow me, rather than just sort of react to the latest
I think this
opinion.
could be piloted, it could be trialled, we could test this. We actually discussed this
it has been
before
tested.
coming in. And we now adjust and we move on. And I think the department's very clear that we will bring forward the right legislation that deals with the backlog, that deals with all the issues that we have in the court system.
Do you believe that the government's proposals are right?
I think they're right, yeah.
Okay. Lauren?
I think that if Keir Starmer was in a stronger position right now, he might not U-turn on it, but I think they're in such a crouch and there's such a large number of quite vocal backbenchers saying that they're unhappy with these proposals. I think if we also didn't have, quite public lawyers, there's a lawyer whose last name is Susskind, who's on Twitter, Joanne Hardy Susskind, who's been sort of really, really quite loud about the things that can fix the backlog, fixing court buildings, fixing tech issues, fixing transportation issues where, trials can't progress because someone can't be delivered to court because they haven't been taken from the right prison or the van's gone to the wrong place, and that fixing a lot of those things would fix a lot more of the backlog. I think that Leveson's whole report is interesting because it talks an awful lot about tech as well, and the need to move and improve tech usage. And there was a judge today. There was one of the court reporters today who tweeted that a judge waited for a witness, a victim actually, to be able to give a via tech statement, and the tech just completely collapsed. And the judge said, "I'm just going to get out Leveson's report to talk about how we need to rely on tech more," which is a massive zinger from the judge there. But I think that the government will U-turn on this. I don't think it's been well thought through enough, considering there are so many other things that can be done.
That tech issue is big. I did jury service during COVID. There was a day when nothing happened because they couldn't get the link to it. The barrister had COVID and decided to represent from home. And actually the perpetrator claimed that because the light was shining off the TV screen, it wasn't a fair trial. And it delayed it by another day. And eventually the case fell apart. And this is a case of a woman who had been allegedly thrown down the stairs and then left to die in her house by this bloke, and then was found 3 days later. Jeez. That was the allegation against him. And the whole case collapsed because they couldn't make the technology work.
Charlotte?
Look, I really empathise with what I'm hearing about the technology. And the technology in the court systems is just utterly, it's like something in the dark ages, really. And some of the court buildings, I don't know if you've been to Wood Green recently, but my goodness, paint peeling off the wall. It's freezing cold often as well.
Some of them who don't have water working, so you can't operate the whole building.
No, it's just a court. Or it's too hot. It's normally one or the other. I've gone to court before and had to ask for permission to sit with my coat and scarf on because it's so cold. And, it's just really dire anyway, being in those environments. Of course it is. But on top of that, the actual environment and the ability to even work
on jury trials
is just awful. But going back to jury trials, one of the things that I would be really curious to see is whether judge-led trials would lead to higher conviction rates in rape cases in particular. particular, even domestic abuse cases and coercive control cases. And the reason that I say that is there's an awful lot of research done on juries relying on rape myths and stereotypes. So, for example, she was wearing that, so she was asking for it.
She was drunk.
She was drunk. She had consensual sex with him on one occasion, so she can't have been raped on another occasion. Oh, they were married. These things.
He looks like such a nice man,
such a lovely guy. So these types of stereotypes we know are used by the defence still, even though they shouldn't be.
They could also be used by judges.
Oh, and I'm not.
Those barristers,
Ian, I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm not disagreeing with you. And as a family law barrister, of course, all of my trials are judge-led. So the advantage of that is you get a judgment at the end. So when I do a rape case, a long fact-find hearing, it could last weeks. At the end of that, a judge will give a full judgment as to why they've either found rape or they haven't. And then you can work through that judgment and look if they've relied on rape stereotypes and myths. And I've taken those cases up to the Court of Appeal and in the High Court been successful in appealing cases of that nature. But of course, in crime, you don't get reasons as to why a jury's decided the defendant is not guilty. If it's judge-led, I assume we would.
As well in some
we
cases.
would. I assume we would. And then perhaps they could appeal.
OK, right, we must move on. It's 10 to 9.
On the latest episode of The Newsagents.
The Mandelson files are handed from the Cabinet Office to the Metropolitan Police. Is this shaping up to be potentially the worst corruption scandal in British politics for the last half-century?
Get the latest episode of The Newsagents with Emily Maitlis, John Sopel and Lewis Goodall. Listen or watch on our free Global Player app or the LBC app.
Shine 9.
Question with Iain Dale on LBC.
So Ashley Fox, Mike Reeder, Charlotte Proudman and Laura McEvitt with us answering your questions. Right, Claire in Northampton. For Mike, who's my MP, how difficult is it to work with West Northamptonshire Council now that it's run by Reform UK? And on that theme, and this is me, does the rhetoric from Reform UK in particular make it harder to work cross-party? In recent weeks, Reform's head of policy, Zia Youssef, has condemned politicians from other parties for appearing to be friendly with other off-camera on shows like this one. Right, let's Well, might as well ask you, Mike, on that one.
So I haven't got one of those crazy reform councils in West Northamptonshire. No, not too crazy anyway. Genuinely, maybe they're going to get in trouble with Zia and Nigel at one stage. They want to work cross-party. I mean, we've had a councillor turning up naked and getting in a bath on a Zoom call with other councillors, which the council subsequently then accidentally deleted the footage, and so we now nickname him Councillor Pecker. But generally, actually, the reform group in West Northants came in without a plan, without any kind of manifesto. And what's happened is the council is now run by officers. And I always thought, actually, if politicians got out of the way, things would be quicker. But what I realised is without any political emphasis or what people want to achieve, you just got kind of a run-of-the-mill council that wants to do nothing. I don't know what they want to achieve. Actually, what used to happen is the leader of the council would come and see me every quarter, have a sit down, and he'd come with the chief exec, Anna, who's just retired. She's brilliant. And asking him, what's your plan for the town centre? And he'd look at Anna and essentially looked at Anna for what's the response. What are you doing about SEND? And he'd look at Anna and she would tell him, we're building a new SEND school, we're doing this, we're doing that. So actually, I've got a reform council with no politics, no drive and no vision. So it actually makes it very easy in some respects to get things done because they accept that things just get done to them and they don't really fight it.
Lauren, there are no... Well, actually, there is one now. One member of the Senate is reform.
Laura Ann Jones defected.
Yeah. But, I mean, these elections in May, I think, in Wales are going to be more interesting than anywhere else in the country.
Yeah. So we've got a new system coming in May. We're moving from 60 members of the Senate to 96. We no longer have a constituency link. We have 16 mega constituencies with 6 members per constituency, elected on the closed list system. So the names only go out on about a month before. I think they're on the ballot, but it's the whole list that is under the ballot of the named party. Polling out last week indicated that only 52% of the people of Wales understand that there's a new system coming and that they're no longer going to be able to vote for an individual in a constituency. And reform, this is the ideal system for them because they don't have to declare a leader in Wales. It sounds like they're going to on Thursday, by the way. It sounds like they're going to have a leader in Wales by Thursday, but they don't have to declare a leader until way late in the day. They don't have to declare who their candidates are. They don't even have to declare what their policies are. So I haven't heard them say anything about how they're going to fix a crumbling health system in Wales. 20% of Welsh primary school leavers are leaving school functionally illiterate. And there's nothing that they've said about it. They've said nothing on planning. They've said nothing on transport. Reform are going to be, what it looks like, the second largest party within Wales. However, the Senedd is designed to be a more collaborative chamber than Parliament is in London. And as a result, the parties have always worked together within the chamber and within the, passing legislation significantly better than other legislatures have in the UK. And that might alter significantly because it looks like Reform may have the Llywyd, which is the presiding officer, the speaker equivalent. They'll obviously have representation on the business committee. They'll run a lot of other committees. And how they perform within there is going to be quite interesting. But Plaid Cymru, it looks like, are going to be the largest party in what looks like probably a minority government. And they're all going to have to learn to work together to pass the budget, because if they don't, you get an immediate 25% haircut on the budget.
Well, I'm already looking forward to chairing a leaders' debate in Wales.
Are
during
you?
The campaign.
Oh, excellent.
I might have a little chat to you about that, because I'm probably underbriefed at the moment. Charlotte?
Look, I think it's really important that politicians work together across different political parties, across the political spectrum. It's how people get things done. And often you can find commonalities, I think particularly working in the domestic abuse sphere, importantly, we do find that there are commonalities. Working with Conservative MPs, myself, Labour has always been, I would have thought, my political home. And yet I've represented people from literally across the political spectrum. And I think that's incredibly important. One of the things that we know, particularly concerning domestic abuse, is that it affects women and some men from all walks of life, whatever your demographic background. And if we can get legislation that can help transform people's lives, then I will work with whoever I need to work with, even if I'm born and die Labour.
OK. Ashley?
I think it's very important politicians work together. So I went to a meeting with some Lib Dem MPs from Somerset. We met Alison McGovern, the local government minister, and we jointly made the argument that Somerset get a poor deal because it's so rural. Now, that doesn't stop me then criticising Somerset Council, run by the Liberal Democrats, for not running their council very well. for spending £20 million on consultants to tell them how to save money, just as one example. So you can work together on some things and not on others. I had a campaign last year to get the right for special constables to have the right to unpaid leave. And I worked with MPs and peers of different parties. And we got that amendment passed in the Lords by a crossbencher, Lord Hogan Howe. And then the government put forward a compromise amendment in the Commons. So we did work together and we got a result.
Do you remember that Labour MP Laura Pidcock, who was like a Corbynite MP from Durham? And I remember once she said, "Oh no, I could never be friends with a Tory." And I'm thinking, you're not going to last long in Parliament, because if you want to get anything done in Parliament, you have to work cross-party.
I have to say at the moment, I don't see reform in kind of the cross-party groups. I don't see them doing much at all. And, obviously they don't have a position on select committees.
There's only 8 of them.
I mean, they're growing numbers, aren't they? But it's quite
in
interesting.
Your lobby, not ours.
Do you see the two of them?
Two of them voted the wrong way last night. And Kemi tweeted saying they're your problem now.
Right, we have to go to our fun question. We've actually got 2 fun questions tonight, so you can choose which one you want to answer. The first one is from Chrissy in Worcester. Shoppers at a Tesco store have been confused seeing signs in Welsh because the shop is in Cornwall. What's your worst languages faux pas? Or this next one from Alexander in Knockholt. I know one of your guests is a fan of Twilight Struggle, but what is everyone's favourite board game? Lauren.
So I am the guest who's a fan of Twilight Struggle, so that's already been answered. My nerdery has been published on this programme before, but the signs in Welsh I find fascinating because Cornish, Welsh and Breton are incredibly similar. And if you watch a video of a Cornish person, a Welsh person and a Breton person speaking their languages together, they're really, really similar. So I think real Cornish speakers would have been fine with Welsh in a supermarket. My worst language faux pas probably is I've been working in Welsh politics for about 20 years and I'm still genuinely rubbish at it. I've tried really hard. Mutations really stump me. I've worked at it and I'm pants.
What's pants in Welsh?
Not there.
Mike.
So I've got lots of friends who do like these very complicated board games, and I do quite like learning them, and then I forget them and get the rules wrong. Actually, I'm a big fan of the game called Monopoly Deal, which is the card version of Monopoly, which is a very quick, fast game, and I could play that for hours. So that would be my favourite game.
Charlotte?
Oh, gosh, Mike's stolen my thunder there with Monopoly.
Well, maybe we can have a competition,
Maybe we'll on the next show. We'll have a Monopoly game. I'm not a huge fan myself of board games. I know lots of people really enjoy them. I find myself, I can't quite focus with the attention span that often these long board games require. So they can go on for hours and throughout the night.
Spoken like a true young person. Ashley?
Not board games, but I like Texas Hold'em poker.
Ooh.
And so to have an evening of that with friends, and you have to put some chocolate into a big bowl, and then the winner takes the big bowl of chocolate. So
that sounds
the stakes
like my
aren't
sort
too
of game.
high.
Oh,
sounds fun.
Babies.
Yeah.
It's fun and it makes for a good evening.
Well, thank you all very much. Really enjoyable edition of Cross Question. On tomorrow's panel, we have the Advance UK leader and former deputy leader of Reform UK, Ben Habib, the columnist Ella Whelan, plus the Politico journalist Bethany Dawson. Coming up in the next hour, we're going to return to the Epstein scandal and talk about the effect it's had and is now having on the royal family and the entire institution of the monarchy. Within the Epstein files, an email seemingly sent by Ghislaine Maxwell suggests, did I pronounce her name right? I don't think I did. Ghislaine Maxwell suggests that the infamous photo of Andrew Mountbatten Windsor with his arm around his alleged victim Virginia Giuffre is genuine, and that Andrew's claims that he was at Pizza Express in Woking instead was a lie. The former prince, of course, denies any wrongdoing. But how much damage is this whole saga doing to the royal family? And why are we hearing so little from most of his relatives? What damage does it do to your faith in our royal family and the institution of the British monarchy?
On your radio, on the LBC app, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom, MPs have approved the release of documents relating to Lord Mandelson's appointment as ambassador to the US. Sensitive documents will now be handed over to the Intelligence Committee. The Prime Minister says Lord Mandelson lied repeatedly about the extent of his relationship with the late paedophile Jeffrey Epstein, but also admitted he knew Mandelson had continued his relationship with Epstein after his conviction. Mike Reeder, Labour MP for Northampton South, told LBC his reaction to hearing that. that.
I didn't know what to say. In the office, we were shocked. I mean, Wes Streeting put it, very well earlier. There is no, guilty by association. We've got to be very careful about, what did Keir know? We don't know that, but clearly Peter Mandelson pulled the wool over Keir's eyes and the vetting team's eyes and those around Keir's eyes.
An email seemingly sent by Ghislaine Maxwell appears to confirm the infamous photo of Andrew Mountbatten Windsor and Virginia Giuffre is real. It appears to contradict Andrew's claim that he never met Giuffre and that the image may have been doctored. He denies wrongdoing. LBC's Henry Riley has the latest.
In a 2019 interview, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor said he couldn't recollect the purported photo of him with his arm around his accuser, the late Virginia Giuffre, suggesting the infamous image was fake or doctored. But in a bombshell email seemingly from Ghislaine Maxwell, it appears to suggest otherwise and contradict the former Prince's account. A message labelled draft statement sent from Ms Maxwell to Jeffrey Epstein says a photo was taken. Henry Riley, LBC, Sandringham.
A 76-year-old man who has sexually assaulted children at a summer camp after lacing their sweets with tranquilizers has admitted another charge. Former vet John Rubens pleaded guilty to drugging his wife to make her sleep through his catalogue of abuse last July. An 18-year-old man's been arrested on suspicion of murder after a student was stabbed in Leicester city centre. The victim died in hospital after being found close to De Montfort University's campus yesterday. The Princess of Wales has issued a new personal video message to mark World Cancer Day. Kate tells how her own personal journey has moments of fear and exhaustion, but also moments of strength and kindness. In the city, the FTSE 100's closed up 87 points at 10,402. The pound buys $1.36 and €1.15. LBC weather, spells of rain lingering in the north tonight. That will move south later, a low of 0. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Daryl Jackson.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Iain Dale.
6 minutes past 9 on LBC. It comes as little surprise that literally every hour or so there is a new revelation from this stash of documents and emails that was released only a few days ago, and they're not all about Peter Mandelson. And one of the ones that's been released tonight seems to confirm that the infamous photo of Andrew Mountbatten Windsor with his arm around his chief accuser, Virginia Giuffre, was genuine. Now, he's long disputed the authenticity of the image of him in intimate contact with Virginia Giuffre when she was just 17. And his suggestion that the damning 2001 image may have been faked was central to the defence that he tried to put over in that disastrous Newsnight interview with Emily Maitlis. But today an email came to light, apparently from the disgraced socialite Ghislaine Maxwell, in which she said she was stating for the record as fact that not only had she introduced the former prince to Giuffre, but the image was taken at her London home that same night. Now, her admission, unearthed by the Daily Mail, will come as a major blow to Andrew, who, of course, he leaves his controversial Pizza Express alibi in absolute tatters. Now, this claim was made in a series of 2015 emails released in a tranche of more than 3 million Jeffrey Epstein-related documents by the US Department of Justice last week. Drafting a statement intended to hit back at reports of mounting allegations in the press, disgraced socialite Maxwell had sent Epstein an email asking for his approval. It read, "In 2001, I was in London when," this bit's redacted, "I met a number of friends of mine, including Prince Andrew." Now, this bombshell email confirms that the infamous 2001 photo of him with his arm around his chief accuser was indeed genuine. And I've got a full text of this email here. There are little bits of it that are redacted. It's too long to read out. But she wrote this draft statement confirming that she had introduced Andrew to Giuffre when she was a teenager. "I never asked," and bits redacted, "to give him a massage," her draft statement added. In the body of the email, she said, "I'm stating for the record as fact," before adding, "Prince Andrew came to my house to visit me," redacted, "was in the house, and they did meet." However, she claimed she had no knowledge of Ms. Giuffre having sexual activity with Andrew or any other famous people. Epstein replied, saying her statement left too many unanswered questions, adding, "Her and Andrew, what's the deal here? Why is she there?" Maxwell insisted that she needed the statement ASAP and that she was advised to say, "I was not aware of massage with Andrew in my house." These things have to stay, along with meeting Virginia and rebutting those allegations. I need it ASAP. Now, in the email headed First Draft Privileged Joint Defence Agreement, Maxwell claims she was compelled to speak out due to the salacious claims against her. She says, "The allegations made against me by redacted are lies. I have consistently stated that they're untrue, and I've waited for an opportunity to prove this in a court of law." Now, seeking to discredit Giuffre, who took her own life at the age of 41 last year, Maxwell stated, "The salacious claims she makes are untrue and made purely for financial gain." I could go on, but I'd be here all night if I read the rest of that. But you get the picture. I mean, this email appears to undermine all of Andrew's claims, or certainly relating to where he was on that evening in 2001. Now, given also the fact that the King is known to be, well, according to my podcast partner Tessa Dunlop, very, very annoyed with the Prime Minister for throwing Andrew under the bus in the way that he did on Monday, basically saying he should cooperate with the US congressional inquiry. Now, I've no idea of the truth of that, but let's assume there is some truth in it. Does all of this sort of start to shake your confidence in the monarchy? I mean, this argument has been going on for a long time surrounding Prince Andrew. He is only but one member of the royal family, or at least was. I suppose he still is in sort of private terms. Do you feel that the monarchy is on shaky ground at the moment, and that sort of one more heave, and it wouldn't take too much for the public to turn against the monarchy as an institution? 0345 6060 973. And do you want to actually hear more from the King and other members of the royal family on this? I mean, yesterday we heard from a member of the royal family about these new revelations for the first time, and this is Prince Edward, the Duke of Edinburgh, speaking on CNN.
I know you've put in various plans in place to move the institution forward, but how are you coping with that?
Well, with the best will in the world, I'm not sure this is the audience that is probably the least bit interested in that. So they all came here to listen to about education solving the future. But no, I think it's all really important always to remember the victims and who are the victims in all this.
Robert Hardman joins me, royal commentator for the Daily Mail, who's also the author of books including Charles III, New King, New Court, The Inside Story. Robert, very good evening. Where do you think the royal family are in the affections of the nation at the moment? And do you think all these allegations against Prince Andrew, or the former Prince Andrew, are really starting to have an effect on the popularity of the monarchy in general?
Good evening, Ian. It's only really a few weeks ago, it seems, maybe a couple of months, that we were hearing, when is the King going to strip Andrew of all his titles? When is he going to kick him out of Royal Lodge? And all that's happened. I think it's hard to dispute that the monarchy, and the King certainly, has done pretty much all he can to dissociate himself and the monarchy. I mean, he can't get away from the fact that Andrew is his brother, and that there is a sort of very basic obligation to sort of keep a roof over his head, not least because if you don't, who knows what else he might do. But beyond that, he's lost his title, he's lost his royal position, he's utterly degraded, disgraced. He's actually now been treated on a par with a traitor. The treatment meted out on him was last meted out to a grandson of George III, who was a British prince, had his princeship taken away during the First World War for fighting on the other side. So, I mean, Andrew is about as far removed as you can get. And I think the public on the whole, they understand that. I don't think they look at Andrew and think, well, Andrew equals Charles equals William equals Prince Edward, we just heard just there. I think people realise he's been a huge embarrassment to the monarchy as well as to his country. I think there's a general sense that, thank goodness, the late Queen isn't around to have to see this, because it would totally break her heart. But I think people have the wherewithal to separate Andrew and the monarchy. I mean, it's no question it's deeply embarrassing for the monarchy, but I think it would have serious constitutional, even existential threat to the monarchy if Andrew was seriously in line for the throne. But he's not. He's eighth in line. There's a separate debate about should he be kicked out of the line of succession. I mean, that's, Parliament could spend ages on that. The bottom line is, if he got anywhere near the throne, we'd be straight back to 1936. It would be compulsory abdication. You're out, mate. And if he didn't abdicate, well, that would be the end of the monarchy. But we're not there, Ian. I mean, I think we're in a situation where people almost possibly feel slightly sorry for the king, that he's got this hideous millstone around his neck. And I do remember being on the Newsnight studio on the night when, just after it had been announced that the king was taking away all his titles, the whole caboodle, everything, and there were Virginia Giuffre's family were live on the program, and they were sort of tearful and with thanks.
I remember watching it.
What they said had to be done.
What about the fact that he's moved out of Royal Lodge? I get the impression that wasn't voluntary, that the timing of it wasn't down to him. I mean, what lies behind all of that?
Oh, I mean, no, and I think nothing's really in his control now. I mean, he's been. We were always told when the news came out back just before Christmas that he was, I think it was late October, early November, that he was going to leave Royal Lodge. We were told it would be in the new year, sometime in January or February, and he's clearly being held to that timetable. We understand that the house that's been earmarked for him on the Sandringham estate isn't quite ready yet. But rather than leave him in Royal Lodge and wait for the house to be ready, I think the King's taken the view, well, just get him out of Windsor, get him off the Windsor estate, get him. I think these images in recent days of him riding his horse and waving at people, I think there's just a general view now we can't have any more of this. With every day, every passing day, as you've said, Ian, there's fresh embarrassment and just general tawdry revelations. I think he's effectively been sent into internal exile. The one thing I'm wondering is when he might actually just get on a plane and maybe go to the Middle East.
Well, I was just about to ask you exactly that question, because I think, in a sense, he can never lead a normal life, and a lot of our listeners will no doubt say, well, nor should he, given what's happened. But I wonder whether he and Sarah Ferguson, maybe together, may just sort of go and live abroad somewhere. Do you think that's the most likely possibility?
I think it's certainly a possibility that he would go and live abroad. I mean, when we strip this whole business back, I mean, the point is, he still hasn't been charged with anything. The situation hasn't really changed. I mean, it gets more just sort of grotty and extraordinary and depraved by the day, the revelations, as you say. But I mean, nothing's changed materially or legally. So he, for the moment, just sits in a remote part of Norfolk where he's got nothing to do except sort of watch golf videos. I think it's possible. I mean, this is what's happened to other disgraced members of other royal families over the years, is that they do go and live abroad. I mean, Juan Carlos of Spain, after he stepped down as king and made all sorts of lurid accusations, he went off to Saudi Arabia to start with. I think he's now in the United Arab Emirates. It's a part of the world where, let's say, it doesn't quite hold people to quite as high standards as this country does, he could lead a sort of a life of some sort of exile there. I think, he's obviously got his children, his grandchildren in this country, so he's not going to detach himself completely from the UK. But it's hard to see how he can lead any sort of long-term existence as a sort of ostracised, vilified hermit in a farmhouse on the edge of the North Sea.
You just finally, you mentioned the late Queen Elizabeth. Are there not also questions to ask about what Her late Majesty knew about some of these allegations surrounding her son? I mean, it's suggested that she helped pay the £12 million settlement given to Virginia Giuffre shortly before she died in 2022.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are questions about, it's the old who knew what and when. There have been questions really asked ever since the Newsnight interview back in 2019. And there was the then Prince Andrew talking about, coming up with his various alibis about, being at Pizza Express in Woking on a particular day, all that stuff. To which people immediately said, well, where are the Metropolitan Police logbooks? This is someone who's had police protection at considerable public expense for most of his life. Where are the police reports? I mean, at the very least, those are questions, I think, for the Met. Did the Palace ask the Met? Who knows? I think at the time, a lot of it was just, people were taking his word. He was someone who was, Prince Andrew was a force to be reckoned with around the palace. And, even when people did try and rein him in, he could get very difficult about it. And I think it's clear that the people within the royal household should have been a lot tougher with him a lot sooner, and they weren't.
Robert, thank you very much for joining us this evening on LBC. That's Robert Hardman. His book, Charles III, New King, New Court, The Inside Story. It's a brilliant read. If you want to know all about our king, that is the one book you should read. Right, we're going to come to your calls in a minute. The question we're asking, how damaging has this been for the wider institution of the monarchy? What do you want to hear from the king and other members of the royal family on this? If anything, do you think they need to speak out in some way? I mean, you heard that little clip of what Prince Edward said. Didn't really tell us an awful lot, did it? I suspect that there's a mixture of anger among the royal family at Prince Andrew's behaviour, but also sorrow, because he is still the brother of the king, the brother of Princess Anne, the brother of Prince Edward, and therefore, there's always familial loyalties here which conflict sometimes with your role, with the royal family's member's role in public life. Well, he hasn't got public life anymore. But what other humiliations do you think are set to afflict the artist formerly known as Prince Andrew, but you know what I mean, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor? Do you think that there is more to come from these 3 million documents that have been released by the US Department of Justice? And do you think the sort of law enforcement authorities need to get involved, particularly after this revelation this evening about this email from Ghislaine Maxwell? 0345 6060 973. Roger says, so deferential. I'm not being deferential. I'm asking questions. It's 21 minutes past 9.
The LBC app. News your way. This is LBC. Britain's conversation. Iain Dale. Alexa, send a comment to LBC.
23 minutes past 9 on LBC. I suppose, in a sense, I'm asking you a more general question tonight also, which maybe I haven't articulated yet. But I think it is this. Has the whole Prince Andrew Epstein files saga undermined your faith in the monarchy as an institution? I don't know the answer to that, really. I don't know whether the majority of the country would say yes, because you could take the view, well, it's one member of the royal family. Why should it undermine the institution? But it's been relentless, hasn't it, really, over the last, 5, 6, 7 years. And particularly at the moment, with all of these documents being released, I haven't seen any polling on the popularity of the royal family lately. So has it undermined your confidence? Grace is in Ealing. Hi, Grace.
Hi. I mean, I've not ever been much of a monarchist, but I think that this is an additional frustration and is for other people as well. And I've heard a lot of people today speak about how they've always been a fan of the Queen, but now have suspicions about how much she knew. And I think that it really exemplifies the issue of entitlement, because on the one hand, obviously, we aren't going to blame Charles and other family members for what Andrew has done, but the whole concept, the institution of the monarchy, suggests that some people are special by dint of birth and above everyone else. And increasingly in our society, we rightly refuse to believe that. I find it ironic, that the king is supposedly the head of the church and we've got this Christian heritage, but in Christianity, people are not superior to others by dint of birth. It's entirely the opposite of what Jesus came to say. And the people of Britain were previously convinced by the idea of the divine right of kings, but that's not biblical. They couldn't read the Bible, the majority of the population, when that was put in place. And so I think that people have been for a long time kind of putting up with this idea because historically it's what we have had, but more and more people are thinking the monarchy is an injustice, and if they're not going to behave in a way that makes them bastions of British culture to be shown off around the world, if they're not going to be good representatives for charities, it's particularly horrible when there are charities that they are rightly supporting, but then there's this abuse also going on. I think people lumping the whole monarchy together are just getting more and more fed up with the, like I say, entitlement that Andrew has demonstrated, but which the monarchy itself also has intrinsically. So, I mean, do you think there is a danger to the monarchy now, or has it not got to that stage? I mean, I would want to look at polling to see if that was certain, but I'm very struck by a lot of people I've heard today who are keen monarchists normally, who had really loved the Queen, saying, I'm shocked that the Queen didn't do more about this, or that the Queen, didn't bring more to light. I think a lot of people are, really rightly horrified. And the issue of sex abuse of young people is plainly the thing that disgusts people more than anything else. And I think it becomes politicised when there are some people who want to use the horror of it for their own political ends in criticising particular groups of people in a way that's fallacious and not necessarily accurate. But we can end up spending all our time being very angry about this particular horror because it is so disgusting and it's so removed from what most people would ever want to do. And we can forget that we've all got flaws and sins we need to work on, because we're also angry whenever we hear about this disgusting crime that is the sex abuse of young people. And so I think people's revulsion maybe, a stain on the monarchy generally, and the fact that people are more and more conscious of some people thinking that they're entitled by dint of birth to look down on others and to abuse others in this way. Do you think it goes wider than this, though, that it's not just about the royal family? This is, you bring in Peter Mandelson into this as well now, where this is a stain on what people perceive as an establishment that's rotten to the core. Absolutely. I mean, people for years have been talking about how the elites are all abusing children, and some of their ideas about how people are abusing children do still seem a bit far-fetched, but clearly there have been people in positions of power abusing girls and women, And a lot of people increasingly feel distrusting of those in power, and it's concerning in the sense that obviously the crime itself is awful enough, but also I worry about the population being unable to listen to or trust people in power, because in our minds we can lump all politicians and people in power together, and people are thinking they're all in this, or we can't trust these politicians because these other politicians have done this, and it's so disgusting and horrible. It's definitely putting in people's minds a deep distrust and hatred for a lot of people who are in political power. Reading some of the things about Epstein and how he's impacted our own politics via Peter Mandelson, it's really shocking. And I'm not sure how we can rectify the corruption, because obviously there are plenty of people in positions of power who are completely innocent and helping to do positive things in our country, but a lot of the population lump people together.
OK, Grace, thank you. Gordon says, I think that as long as no whiff of scandal attaches ever to Kate or William, the monarchy is safe, but the whole thing hangs by that thread. If that goes, it all goes. And I think there is probably a lot to be said for that point of view. Debbie says, this would break the late Queen's heart. Let's not forget she gave Andy £12 million to pay off a woman he'd never met for something he'd not done. Well, this email tonight rather demonstrates, or it seems to demonstrate, that he had actually met Virginia Giuffre. That's from Debbie. And this one is from, it just says, no, I don't know why that's not even on there. Right, we will come back to your calls. We'll come back to your messages in just a moment on the future of the monarchy. Has your view of the monarchy been impacted by the Epstein files? It's 9:30 on LBC. Let's get the latest news headlines from Daryl Jackson.
MPs have approved the release of documents relating to Peter Mandelson's appointment as US ambassador. Sir Keir Starmer earlier agreed to hand over sensitive files to the Intelligence Select Committee in a climb down. An email seemingly sent by Ghislaine Maxwell to Jeffrey Epstein appears to confirm a photo of Andrew Mountbatten Windsor and Virginia Giuffre is real. It appears to contradict Andrew's claim that he never met Giuffre and the image may have been doctored. He's always denied any wrongdoing. And a man's admitted drugging his wife so she would not wake up while he sexually assaulted children at a summer camp. 76-year-old John Rubin previously admitted abusing 2 boys in Leicestershire last year and child cruelty towards 6 other victims. LBC weather, spells of rain lingering in the north tonight. That will move south later, a low of 0.
This is LBC.
At King.
Iain Dale. Call 0345 6060 973. Text 84850. Alexa, send a comment to LBC.
9:33 on LBC. How damaging has this whole Epstein Files scandal been for the wider institution of the monarchy? We know how damaging it's been to the former Prince Andrew, now known as Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. But do you also want to hear a bit more from maybe the King or other members of the royal family on their views of what has happened? Because whenever there is this sort of scandal, there are usually headlines that say, oh, this is the last twitchings of the monarchy. I don't believe it is at all. I don't believe that the disgraceful antics of Andrew should reflect on the monarchy as an institution. He absolutely sees himself as an entitled individual. I've heard so many stories down the years of his gratuitous rudeness to people that he seems to think are socially inferior to him. I remember Jackie Smith telling me that when she was industry minister, she used to have to sit next to him at dinners, and she thought he was one of the rudest people she'd ever met. And he was a trade envoy at the time. Andrea is in Leighton. Hi, Andrea.
Ian, good afternoon. It's a pleasure to talk to you again. Yes. Now, as far as I'm concerned, I'm not a Marxist, and in fact, I'm a bit of a Marxist revolution. As much dirt attaching to the monarchy is a good thing, as far as I'm concerned, because there's something intrinsically wrong.
You see, now conspiracy theorists are going to say you're only cutting him off because of what he just said, but we were literally only getting every second or third word. So I promise you, we're going to get you back on a better line. But in the meantime, let's go to Marion in Finchley. Marion, hi.
Oh, good evening, Ian. Thank you for taking my call. I've been a staunch monarchist ever since I was a little girl during the war. I'm 90 now. I've loved the monarchy. George VI, absolutely wonderful king, and the Queen Mother. Every family, sadly, has someone that occasionally one doesn't want to, keep in the family closely. And I'm absolutely shocked and absolutely horrified, as everybody is, at the stories that are coming out and the photographs of the King's brother. And I am extremely sorry for the members of the royal family, but first of all, of course, I'm extremely sorry for the victims and the dreadful way. I want to make a statement about men, Ian, but first of all, I want to say that on the 19th of January, I attended a commemoration which I lay flowers for every year of Jan Palach. Do you remember his name?
I do remember the name, but I can't quite remember why.
The Czech student who set fire to himself.
That's the one.
At the age of 20 in Wenceslas Square, and I knew his brother. His brother died last year, so it was a particularly poignant time, and I actually got there, although I'm pretty immobile. I got there with a friend and a taxi, and Jan Palach, is an example of the wonderful courage of men, and I really have always admired the opposite sex since I was about 10, and I was sent to a school where there were gorgeous male prefects for me to admire. So I don't want to make a statement about men that sounds as if I don't like men, but, I'm afraid most of these problems, going back as far as the abdication, even in the 30s, it's men who are creating some of these problems, a small number of problems here, and and so many men are wonderful and brave and wonderful family members and members of the community and so on. But if you look at this situation that's arisen now, not only with Andrew but also Mandelson, I'm afraid it is men, and poor girls and women are at the receiving end of some really disgraceful, horrible behaviour. And this is something that's gone on probably for millennia, hasn't it?
Well, it has. It goes back to our discussion last night on the programme at 9 o'clock, I suppose, in a very sort of horrible way. Marion, thank you very much. Right, we have Andrea back on the phone. Andrea, do you want to start again?
Yes, about that, Ian. As far as I'm concerned, the more destabilising accusations and rumours that surround the monarchy, the better, because I'm in favour of the abolition of the House of Windsor and the hereditary principle. And rather like your previous caller, there is probably something intrinsically unattractive about masculine power in high office. There's that famous dictum of Lord Acton, all power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. So what we could do is in the crown and yet have given to people by, say, lot or in terms of merit, just not the hereditary principle.
Well, I have a little sympathy with your view in that if we were inventing the monarchy today, we wouldn't be inventing it with the hereditary principle, would we? Because you just wouldn't. But I think the argument has always been, well, successive monarchs have been relatively good for the country. I mean, there's always the odd one that isn't, but you look at the late Queen, which even people on the left, I think, acknowledged that she was a very good Queen. George VI was a very good king. Edward VIII was not. So I accept that there is a debate to be had about it, but it's a bit like the House of Lords, isn't it? I mean, we have now, I think the last batch of hereditary peers, they are leaving. And again, you wouldn't invent the House of Lords now, but it actually does quite a good job in scrutinising and revising legislation. So you sometimes have to be careful what you wish for if you want to replace it with something else.
A prudent remark, Ian. I'm a kind of sort of English constitutionalist, incrementalist, one step at a time. But it's a small constitutional revision to just abolish the hereditary principle and get rid of the House of Windsor. They can all go to the Bahamas like Edward VIII. And instead, it would be quite easy to invest the powers, rights, duties, ceremonies in, say, two elected women. The question of how would you put people in the office?
Why do they have to be women?
As a previous caller was saying, like Elizabeth I, funnily enough, or Victoria, I actually think that women invested with great power have a more mature, responsible, multipolar outlook on things. They tend not to be sort of...
Did you think that about Margaret Thatcher?
She was a brilliant woman, but as Private Eye used to say, she was asked, what do you want for the vegetables? And she said, they're already at the table. But she had a strange mixture of brilliant womanly perception, but kind of masculine va-va-voom. And of course, I'm not a fractionalist in my politics, but I'd rather have Maggie Thatcher. Well, the point is, how do you preserve both the prime ministership and the head of state in the crown? Seems to me to be the question.
Well, look, every country in the world has a head of state, whether they're elected or whether they're not. And I think it's a bit odd to suggest that Britain should be an outlier in that and not actually have a head of state, or they should have two joint women in charge of it. I mean, that's a bizarre suggestion.
I'm not quite sure I said that. So the question is, how would you elect people to actually exercise the power of the crown rather than having them given them by the hereditary principle? That's the central point I'm making. So you could have a lottery, all people over 35, some sort of distinction, artists.
Well, I mean, surely most other countries, they would have an election. If you're going to have an alternative to the monarchy and have a president, then you have to have it elected. But I mean, I think the problem there is that you might get. I think the British have a peculiar sense of humour, and I think it would be quite risky to have a presidential election. But hey, why not? Andrea, thank you. Let's go to David in Cheltenham. Hello, David.
Hi, good evening. I think the monarchy is irrevocably damaged by these goings-on. It's the beginning of the end for me. I used to be a monarchist, but I'm not anymore.
What, just because of this?
No, I've gradually been changing my mind over the years. I think the monarch should be resigned to chessboard and playing cards, that's it. Kings and queens is just ridiculous. The whole thing's absurd. Why can't the head of state be the current prime minister?
Well, it's possible to do that. Other countries do that. I mean, if you look at President Macron in France, I mean, he has a prime minister, but effectively he holds a lot of executive power as well. So it's perfectly possible to do that. But it would change the whole nature of our country, wouldn't it? And I'm not sure that would necessarily be a good thing to do.
We need to try it.
Well, we did try it for 10 years, didn't we, in the 1660s?
No, but more recently than that, we need to try. Okay. Try now, bring it up to date. It's out of date. The monarchy is out of date. It's past its sell by date.
All right, thank you. All right, let's take a text here. This is from Geth, who says, Andrew should be investigated properly by the police. If found guilty, he should be prosecuted and the royals should repay the tax we've paid to look after him from when these alleged illegalities happen. Well, I don't know what you're accusing him of doing that's actually breaking a law. And I think that's a big issue here because it's been alleged that I frankly, you know what, I don't even want to go into that. But I think if you say he has to be investigated properly by the police, you have to say what for. And it can't just be saying, lying to Emily Maitlis about where he was on a particular night when he says he was at a Pizza Express in Woking, and it's clear now from these emails tonight that he wasn't. This one is from Valerie. No, it's not. It's from Raheem, who says, will Andrew's life now still be funded by the British public? Well, the answer is no. It's being presumably his stay in Norfolk is being funded by the King, and the King has a private income, so it's not taxpayers' money that is funding that. This one is from Barry, who says, I'm sad this evening. For years, Virginia Giuffre was labelled a liar by Andrew. Today, she appears to have been vindicated. May we remember her today, and may she rest in peace. And he said, as a PS, of course, even if Andrew did meet Virginia Giuffre in 2001, despite having claimed he didn't, that doesn't necessarily mean he broke any laws at that time. I do think that is a valid point to make. It rather goes back to the last question, isn't it? You have to think, he obviously acted in a very distasteful way that we would all condemn. But you've got to kind of identify the law that he would have broken. Now, if he did have sex with a 17-year-old in certain states in America, that is breaking the law. It isn't breaking the law in this country because the age of consent is 16. But on the other hand, I don't know the ins and outs of the trafficking laws, but if it can be proved that she was actually trafficked in the conventional use of that word by Epstein and Andrew knew about it, there may well be a law that he's broken there. 0345 6060 973. It's 9:45.
Coming up at 10 on LBC, Ben Kentish.
Another awful day for Keir Starmer as the fallout from the Mandelson scandal continues. Will this be the issue that forces the Prime Minister to resign, plus the very latest allegations against former Prince Andrew?
Ben Kentish at 10. Listen on our free Global Player app or the LBC app. Dale on LBC. Text 84850.
9:48 on LBC. Let's take this text from Roger, who says, this is the head of state. He was undertaking a role as one of our representatives. No, he's not the head of state. Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor is the brother of the head of state. So, I mean, that's a really weird thing for you to say, if I may say so. Anyway, let's continue. No one and no institution in a democracy should be beyond reproach. Well, I agree with that. Hundreds of people work for and with the monarchy. The idea that this is just a family difficulty is for the birds. This isn't about monarchy versus republic, but about standards in public life, accountability and transparency in our public institutions. Well, you rescued yourself with the rest of that. Thank you very much indeed, Roger. Right, let's go to Colin, who is in Alton in Hampshire. Colin, very good evening.
Hi, good evening, Ian.
Hi.
I only want to make two very brief comments. And that's, can we please stop talking about tearing down the bits and pieces of this country and changing yet another prime minister for things which, even if it is a minor error of judgment, if we got
a minor error.
Well, an error of judgment in making the appointments, yes. I think he could have taken more research and more advice. But I don't necessarily think that man who's trying terribly hard, even though he's unpopular, should be chased out. And I certainly don't think we should even consider changing the monarchy. I mean, are we going to change absolutely everything in front of the rest of the world, and particularly while we're at such a low ebb in everyone's esteem?
Well, I agree with you. I don't think we should change the monarchy. I think the monarchy has adapted to sort of modern ways over the last 20 or 30 years in a way that I think many people doubted that it ever could. I think that the previous texter who was saying, well, if William and Kate were involved in a scandal, that could lead to the end of the monarchy. I think that was probably quite apposite. But so far, I don't think either of them have put a foot wrong.
Hardly anybody has, really. I mean, certainly Charles hasn't. I mean, he waited 60 years to be king, and then he's had cancer, and now we're going to think of even talking about getting rid of it and getting what in its place. And similarly, Keir Starmer, if he was handed out, what would we get?
Well, hopefully someone better. Hopefully. I mean, look.
Up and choose one.
I mean, there are always alternatives. But, I mean, as we saw with the last government, I mean, just because you change a leader doesn't actually make things better. It doesn't necessarily make you more electable. And that possibly is a lesson that the Labour Party need to learn for themselves.
I agree with that 100%. I think you're completely right.
But
I think these changes are the changes. When actually the changes, I mean, this Labour government, I've never voted Labour, and I don't suppose I ever will, but the amount of effort that they put into trying to do things, and yes, they get them wrong, and then they do U-turn after U-turn, but that's because they're listening, and I have a certain sympathy. I think they've made some categoric mistakes chasing all the investors and the entrepreneurs out of the country. 1% of those people pay 30% of our tax, and they're being chased away. It seems madness.
It is madness. You're absolutely right. Colin, I think you should be running the country.
I've been old to start.
You're never too old. Thank you very much. Ian says, the serfs are out in force tonight, kowtowing in unison. That's Ian in 5. It's nothing to do with kowtowing. Just because you believe in the monarchy and you're a supporter of the monarchy, that doesn't mean to say that you doff your cap to them. I've met a couple of, well, in fact, I met the Queen, met the Duke of Edinburgh. I even met Prince Charles once, when he was Prince Charles. Did I bow to any of them? Did I kowtow to any of them? No, I might have nodded my head because it's polite, but I did not. I don't believe that because somebody is born into a royal family that they are in any way a better human being than somebody that isn't. Now, traditionally, people have believed that. They believed in the divine right of kings. Well, I mean, that went out hundreds of years ago, didn't it? So we don't actually have to necessarily believe that that people who are members of the royal family are our betters. I don't believe that. I never have done, but that doesn't mean to say I want to abolish the monarchy. Shrivan is in Hemel Hempstead. Good evening, Shrivan. What would you like to say?
Good evening, and I got a few thoughts on this, if I may.
Go on.
In this whole situation. Firstly, on reflection and the observations I was thinking on, the monarchy will always be in this country because it is part of the historic DNA of this land. It will always be here. And that's why it is admired throughout the world due to the touristic people coming here, enjoying the pompous pageantry, etc. Okay, the other thing is this, with the Andrew revelations, it has unfortunately left an indelible stain on the royal family. And I think this will push them, it will push Andrew into obscurity. He will just become very obscurity. But with the royal family, all the king, etc., and even Andrew's family, I think every day the documents are being drip-fed and some of the quite monstrous allegations and information is coming out. It will push the royal family into some sort of obscurity. I know you mentioned earlier that they should make a statement. I don't think they will be making a statement anytime soon. That's just my observation. And this will push both sides into the obscurity, and the royal family, it will take them a long, long time to overcome this because of the 3 million documents. And then I think everybody suspects more revelations and Andrew's shenanigans will come through. And my last point, I'm thinking on this topic, I think the Queen, the late Queen, in Her Majesty, she may have knew more things about Andrew, and I think that may have hastened her demise. That is my view.
It was rumoured that Andrew was her favourite child. I don't know whether that was true or not. Given that she apparently did pay £12 million to pay off Virginia Giuffre, possibly there was some truth in that. I don't necessarily think it hastened her demise. You could attribute that to all sorts of things. I think that was, how old was she? Was it 95, something like that? I don't really think that a 95-year-old, and we know 96 she was, she died. There are various books that have come out about sort of her last few days, and she clearly had massive health problems in those last few days. So people say, well, people can die of a broken heart. Well, I think if that was the case, I think we should throw a bit of the blame at Prince Harry for that one. But I don't really agree with you on that, Shrivan, but I think you make some other very good points. Let's go to Amanda, who's in Dublin. Hello, Amanda.
Hi there. Yeah, I was just picking up on the point that you said about Andrew having not committed an offence. If the allegations against him about Virginia Giuffre are proved correct, then he did commit an offence because she was 17 and he was far older. And
hang on, what's the law there that he would have broken?
The age of consent is 16, but only if you are the same age, if you're a similar age, not if you're 42 and 17. It's to protect young people, but it's the Romeo and Juliet law. So it is an offence for an older man to have sex with a 17-year-old if that is what is proof that he did.
Okay, I'll take your word for that. That's a new one on me.
But I Googled it as well just to make sure. But it's an offence.
Okay, all right. Well,
and the other thing that you said about replacing the monarchy, in Ireland we have a president and we have a Taoiseach, and both are elected. They are elected in different ways, but in both cases, though we do have a sense of humour, we don't vote in idiots. There's a system that you are voting your president for, and the president is normally a respected politician or a respected member of the community. So an elder statesman normally.
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right. That is a tradition in the Republic of Ireland. I think that there were, shall we say, some question marks over the election of the current incumbent. There wasn't exactly a great field to choose from. But you've had, I've interviewed Mary Robinson. Mary McAleese.
She was brilliant, yeah.
Michael D. Higgins. They were all very, very respected presidents. And hopefully the current incumbent will sort of do a very good job for Ireland. I'm struggling for her name now, which I did follow.
Connolly.
That's the one. I did follow the election quite closely, actually, because I listen to the Irish Times podcast most weeks. So, look, I'm not saying that it's inevitable that there couldn't be another system, but I rather agree with Colin from Alton, who said that, well, Britain wouldn't be Britain without the monarchy. And I know that sounds weird in a way, but I think there is something to that. That the moment that Britain gets rid of all of its traditions, I think that would be a very, very sad day. I mean, people say, well, Britain has to modernise. Well, I think the monarchy has modernised to probably as much as it possibly could do over the last few years. But Amanda, thank you very much indeed for your call. Well, thanks for all of your calls and messages this evening. I'm back tomorrow from 7. If you missed any of this evening's show, you can listen back on our free Global Player app or the LBC app, where you can stay up to date with all the latest news, videos and opinion. Download the official LBC app for free from your app store now. Coming up at 1 on LBC, it's Richard Spur. But right now, Ben Kentish.
Iain, thank you very much indeed. Hello there. Very, very good evening indeed to you this Wednesday night. Ben Kentish here on LBC. On tonight's show,
Mandelson betrayed our country, our parliament, and my party. I regret appointing him.
Huge pressure on Keir Starmer tonight as the fallout from the Peter Mandelson scandal continues. It came after a stunning admission from the Prime Minister today that he did know about the historic links between Jeffrey Epstein and Peter Mandelson, and he was warned about them when he decided to appoint Peter Mandelson as this country's ambassador in Washington. It was a statement that stunned the House of Commons and has left many Labour MPs tonight concluding that Starmer's days in number 10 are fast running out. So do you think the Prime Minister will have to resign over this, and should he?
On your radio, on the LBC app, and
Play LBC.
Leading Britain's conversation. This is